Chapter 628. Master. Letitia bowed to Wuming, who walked out from the shadows to show her respect. Wuming waved his hand casually. Although Wuming had told Letitia many times that there was no need to bow to him every time she saw him, Letitia was still stubborn and had to bow to Wuming every time she saw him. After a while, Wuming gave up on persuading Letitia. After all, she wouldn't lose anything by bowing, right? At this time, Jiuyuko and Haruai Hibakushi, who had turned their heads away, turned their heads back. Villo, we are on the same side, right? Haruai Hibakushi looked at Wuming stubbornly. Let us go. Jiuyuko didn't hold back and shouted at Wuming angrily. Then I'm sorry. Let's not talk about Jiuyuko's attitude first. Wuming shrugged and walked in front of Jiuyuko and Haruai Hibakushi. About the problem of being on the same side, I don't think I'm on the same side as you. Traitor. Shameless. Jiuyuko and Haruai Hibakushi looked like they were betrayed by a traitor. If a passerby who didn't know the situation saw it, they would probably think that it was a tragic drama where two righteous girls were betrayed by a man who was supposed to be on the same side as them. If Wu Ming knew what the two of them were like, he would even have a feeling of, could it be that I'm really a traitor and betrayed them? But there was no if. Wu Ming stretched out his hands and hit Jiuyuko and Haruai Hibakushi on the forehead with lightning speed. Ouch, 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 ouch. Jiuyuko couldn't help but tear up. Ouch. Although Haruai Hibakushi didn't seem to be in much pain, his slightly wet eyes proved that he wasn't as relaxed as he looked. Then can you tell me now? What did you guys do to end up like this? However, after Jiuyuasuka and Kasuga Biao were humiliated by their enemies, their beliefs became even more firm. They were truly unyielding and indomitable. Rejected. Ditto. After the two of them finished speaking, they turned their heads to the side again. However, as captives, the two of them had no right to speak. Looks like you won't confess if I don't do something ruthless. Wuming smiled. However, this smile made Jiuyuasuka and Kasumi's hearts tremble. Their bodies couldn't help but tremble. However, this wasn't enough to convince them. Wuming, who knew this, looked at Letitia. How about this, Letitia, you come with me? Let's play with the two of them. What do you think? Wuming said as his hands moved, as if he was stretching his muscles and bones. As long as you're happy, master. Letitia nodded with a smile, indicating that she would accompany Wuming. Wait a minute, I'm a lady? How can you torture a lady? You? Don't you dare. Jiuyuasuka and Kasuga Biao saw that Wuming didn't seem to be joking. The two of them immediately panicked. Scared? Sorry, it's too late. Then Wuming smiled mischievously. Instantly, chains appeared out of thin air. Then the chains hung Jiuyuasuka and Kasuga Biao up. Their hands were placed horizontally, and their bodies were upright as if Jesus was being tortured. At the same time, the black rope that Letitia tied to the two of them disappeared. Then Wuming wrote a few runes in the air that they couldn't understand and slapped the runes in the air. This was a Lune rune technique with a soundproof effect. Then Wuming snapped his fingers and two feathers appeared out of thin air. Wuming said as he handed one of the feathers to Letitia. Come, Letitia. Letitia nodded and took the feather. Then she walked with Wuming to Jiuyuasuka and Kasuga Biao, who were hung up. Then, under the two's despairing gaze, Wuming took off their shoes. About a few minutes later, Wuming twisted his waist and moved his body twice. I didn't expect you guys to be so strong. Wuming looked at Jiuyuasuka and Kasuga Biao, who had taken off their shoes. Their clothes were drenched in sweat, and they were panting as if they had just run a few thousand meters. There was also Sanmao Cat, who wanted to hug Wuming's leg to show her loyalty to her master. In the end, she was hung up by Wuming's pseudo-heavenly lock. We won't submit. No? That's right. Although the two said so, the exhaustion in their eyes and bodies told them that they couldn't go on anymore. Forget it, I'm not playing anymore. Wuming threw away the feather and looked at Letitia, who also threw the feather to the ground. Tell me what's going on, Letitia. Jiuyuasuka and Kasuga Biao froze. That's right, Letitia knows what happened. Why didn't you ask her earlier? But Wuming kindly explained to the two. Wouldn't that be boring? Then Jiuyuasuka and Kasuga Biao glared at Wuming with murderous eyes. But Wuming just shrugged happily. Letitia sighed helplessly. That's the punishment for this mess. Letitia looked at Jiuyuasuka and Kasuga Biao with pity. Then Letitia told Wuming the whole story. When the three problem children left the Thousand Eyes branch to go shopping, Ryuyuasuka and Letitia followed them. Perhaps it was because of the supervisor. The three problem children were quite well behaved in the beginning and didn't cause any trouble. But problem children were still problem children. After shopping for a while, the three problem children began to rely on the people in the downtown area to play hide and seek with Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia. Because the three problem children were honest at first, Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia relaxed a little. As a result, Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia couldn't find the three problem children. But thankfully the two of them still managed to find 16 knights and the other two. They were on top of an extremely tall art building, looking at the scenery outside the 54,545 gate. This caused a commotion among the pedestrians. After all, the building the three problem children were in was a rare piece of art. Knowing that the problem children caused trouble again, Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia began to capture the problem children. 16 knights ran away quickly, while Jio Yuasuke ran away because of her poor physical fitness. When Kasuga Biao was about to leave with Jio Yuasuke, the two of them were tied up by Letitia with a shadow rope. One of Letitia's gifts, Dragon's Shadow. It was one of Letitia's gifts that had many uses. Wings, weapons, shields, stealth cover, it could be said to be very versatile. And Letitia's strength had recovered to 4 digits. Along with Kasuga Biao, who was half a beat slower because of taking care of Jio Yuasuke, the two of them were caught together by Letitia. 16 knights and Ryu Yuasuke, on the other hand, were in the same situation as before. Chapter 629. After I caught Miss Asuka and Miss Yao, I was following Black Rabbit and 16 knights in the dark. However, they were too fast, so I couldn't catch up with them. Letitia was referring to small alleys like this one. After that, master, you came over? Letitia finished her sentence. Wu-Ming knew what happened after that, although there wasn't anything else. I understand. Thank you for your hard work, Letitia. Wu-Ming patted Letitia's head. Letitia, on the other hand, looked like she was enjoying it. It had to be said that if Letitia's current lowly state and her current expression were seen by those lolicons, who knew how much cuteness they would have. Although Wu-Ming wasn't a lolicon, Wu-Ming had no self-control when it came to cute lolas. Beast. Pervert. That was what Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari said when they saw Wu-Ming's happy expression. You two are really energetic. Wu-Ming narrowed his eyes and turned to look at Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari. This reminded the two of them of the fear of having their souls controlled by feathers. Snap. Wu-Ming snapped his fingers and the silver chains that bound Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari were released. With a clattering sound, the chains returned to the ripples at the top. Jio Asuka fell to the ground on her butt and made a sound of pain. Although Haruai Hikari also fell to the ground on his butt like Jio Asuka, Haruai Hikari's physical fitness was much higher than Jio Asuka's, so she didn't feel much pain. However, because of Wu-Ming's punishment, the two didn't have much strength at the moment. Otherwise, Haruai Hikari wouldn't have fallen to the ground on his butt. At the same time, Sanmao, who was released by Wu-Ming, jumped into Haruai Hikari's arms and meowed worriedly. Then Wu-Ming walked to the two who were sitting on the ground. Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari looked at Wu-Ming's shadow and couldn't help but tremble. Even Sanmao's fur stood on end. Then Wu-Ming personally helped the two of them put on their shoes while Jio Yuasuke and Haruai Hikari looked on in surprise and embarrassment. Wu-Ming clapped his hands and stood up. What happened just now is just a lesson from this time's trouble. Even if you're a problem child, you still have to remember the occasion. Don't do it again. Wu-Ming's tone was quite gentle, just like a big brother next door. Furthermore, Wu-Ming had personally helped them put on their shoes. This made Jioyuki and Haruai Hikari blush. Then Wu-Ming looked. Letitia, look after them. I'll go check on 16th Knights and Black Rabbit. Yes, master. After Letitia nodded, Wu-Ming waved his hand. A dark purple ripple appeared and engulfed Wu-Ming. After watching Wu-Ming leave, Letitia walked to Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari and stretched out her hands. The ground is cold. Get up, you two. Although Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari wanted to get up by themselves, they didn't have much strength left because of Wu-Ming and Letitia's antics. Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari had no choice but to hold Letitia's hand and stand up. How is it? Master is very gentle, right? Letitia's sudden words made Jio Asuka and Haruai Hikari, who were patting the dust off themselves, blush. They recalled the scene where Wu-Ming helped them put on their shoes. He's just a lecher. That guy treated me like that. Even if it's a punishment, I'll remember it. Jio Asuka glared at Letitia. Letitia had also attacked her just now. Jio Asuka remembered it clearly. Unforgivable. Haruai Hikari hugged Sanmao, who was already out of breath, with a face full of displeasure. However, their reactions were seen as shyness in Letitia's eyes. It could only be said that giving carrots with carrots was very effective, wasn't it? Let's go, Haruai Hikari, Gyo Asaka said politely to Haruai Hikari. After Haruai Hikari nodded, Gyo Asaka and Haruai Hikari looked like they were about to leave. What? You two still want to run? Aren't you afraid of Master's punishment? Letitia looked at the two with a smile. The two trembled. They definitely didn't want to go through that kind of hell again. However, Gyo Asaka thought about it again and smiled at Letitia. Villo only asked you to watch over us. He didn't say that we can't leave, Letitia. Gyo Asaka called Letitia intimately. Although it was a play on words, Letitia knew that Gyo Asaka and Haruai Hikari wouldn't cause any more trouble. Moreover, with her around, they wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. If that's the case, then fine. Just like that, Letitia followed Gyo Asaka and Haruai Hikari in the opposite direction of 16 Nights in Black Rabbit. Gyo Asaka and Haruai Hikari really wanted to have a good time shopping. After all, if they were interrupted in the middle of shopping, it would be very unpleasant. While Letitia, Gyo Asaka, and Haruai Hikari were shopping, at the tall building where 16 Nights in Black Rabbit were before, a dark purple ripple appeared on one of the tall buildings and Wuming appeared from it. Why was it where they were before? It was because the two of them were no longer there. Seems like I was having too much fun with Gyo Asaka and Hikari. Where did 16 Nights in Black Rabbit go? Wuming scratched his head. Dong. Suddenly, a loud sound was heard from somewhere not far away. Wuming turned around and saw that the top of a clock tower had broken for some unknown reason, and the big bell on the clock tower had fallen along with it. With his excellent eyesight, Wuming saw 16 Nights in Black Rabbit falling along with the top of the clock tower. Needless to say, the clock tower's destruction must have been done by 16 Nights. The big bell, along with a large number of small and large stones, fell onto the street, causing panic among the onlookers on the street. It should be said that it was impossible not to panic because the stones were falling directly onto the crowd. The people below the clock tower started to panic as they scurried in all directions. However, due to the height of the clock tower and the fact that the residents of the box court world were people who could easily accept sudden surprises, it only took a few seconds for the crowd to escape. Evacuate. However, if the stones in the top of the clock tower were allowed to fall, even if it did not cause any casualties, it would definitely cause damage to the street. Geez, always giving people trouble. Wuming shook his head helplessly. Immediately after, the falling bell tower and stones seemed to have been frozen in midair. Chapter 630. The residents who retreated to the surrounding safe area looked at the strange scene of the bell tower being fixed in midair, and they all discussed in surprise. What's going on? I don't know. Could it be a gift from a powerhouse? I don't know, but this disaster is stopped. Thank God. Wu Ming used his telekinesis to fly to the side of the falling object, that was controlled by his telekinesis. Looking at the wreckage, Wu Ming was even more certain that this was 16 Nights' masterpiece. There was no pattern and the traces of destruction were obvious. Other than 16 Nights, Silent Cries didn't think that there was anyone else who could be like a berserker. Wu Ming had a way to recreate a replacement on the top of the bell tower with advanced item creation, but it wasn't easy. He had to let Wu Ming analyze the structure of the bell tower. If only Kalas was here. Wu Ming sighed. Wu Ming recognized the importance of Kalas more than once. If Kelly was here, it would only take a second for Silent Wonder to complete the scan. Silent Wonder would then be able to use his advanced item creation. But after all, Kalas was now with his original body, and his original body was nowhere to be found. It could only be said that things didn't go as planned. However, Wu Ming wasn't a pessimistic person, so he didn't dwell on this issue. Let's talk about the repair later. Wu Ming looked at Black Rabbit and 16 Nights who had landed on the ground below. With the strength of the two, they naturally wouldn't die from falling from a high altitude, and it was naturally even more impossible for them to be injured. The two landed safely on the ground, but there was a strange thing. They were holding each other's arms. Moreover, there was a contract document. It seemed that the two had made some kind of bet. However, it looked like it was a tie because both of them looked unhappy at the moment. Wu Ming landed directly below. Before reaching the ground, Wu Ming heard the complaints of 16 Nights. I absolutely can't accept it. It's obvious that my side is faster. 16 Nights, who had never lost in games, was very unhappy about the draw. Boxing's judgment won't be wrong. If you have any opinions you can appeal, but the result won't change. Black Rabbit was quite satisfied with the result of the draw. Anyway, her goal had been achieved. From the point of being able to issue any order to 16 Nights unconditionally, Black Rabbit had already profited. Being able to make a problem child obey an order, no matter how you think about it, isn't it? Wait for me, you two. Wu Ming interrupted at the right time. Yo, isn't this little brother? What a coincidence. When 16 Knights saw Wu Ming, it was as if all the previous unhappiness had disappeared. Do you want to have a match with me? The winner will get the chance to give orders to the other party. However, Wu Ming pointed behind him. You guys deal with them first. Wu Ming's tone was full of helplessness. Black Rabbit and 16 Knights looked behind Wu Ming, but the problem was that there was nothing above. Wu Ming kindly reminded. Black Rabbit and Reverse 16 Knights raised their heads and saw a group of flying dragon subspecies descending towards them. Among them, at the forefront, there was a man who didn't ride a dragon. That was Wu Ming's old friend, the scheming man Mandela. Huh? What is that? The straightforward 16 Knights expressed that he didn't know what those people were doing. That's the military police belonging to Salamandra. Black Rabbit showed an expression of being finished. That is to say, they are here to catch us. 16 Knights had a burning look on his face. Please don't be so happy, Mr. 16 Knights. We've gotten into quite a big mess. Black Rabbit was mad at 16 Knights' cheerful and optimistic attitude. More than once, Black Rabbit had the urge to strangle 16 Knights to death. We are finished this time. Black Rabbit bent down dejectedly, looking like he had lost his life. You two don't talk later, I will deal with this old friend. Wu Ming looked at the approaching Mandela and said to Black Rabbit and 16 Knights without looking back. Oh, this is going to be interesting. 16 Knights' reversal looked like he was waiting to watch a good show. He naturally understood what Wu Ming meant by old friend. Mr. Villo, do you know the people from Salamandra? Black Rabbit obviously didn't understand that Wu Ming's old friend was derogatory. In short, don't talk. As soon as Wu Ming finished speaking, the military police from Salamandra landed. Thieves in front, don't move. Mandela acted as if he didn't know Wu Ming and roared at Black Rabbit and 16 Knights behind Wu Ming. But Mandela's words actually included Wu Ming. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes. It seemed that this guy was a little more powerful than Wu Ming thought. But it's just a little bit more powerful. Give me some face, Mandela. The two behind are my people. There are no casualties in this incident, and I will personally fix the clock tower. How about it? Wu Ming said, his whole body exuding a dangerous aura. This aura made the flying dragon subspecies ridden by the Salamandra military police feel uneasy, and began to become restless. But the Salamandra military police also had some skills, and none of the flying dragon subspecies were out of control. Black Rabbit also felt Wu Ming's strong aura. Although Wu Ming did it for them, he was a little uneasy. After all, they were outsiders. They caused trouble in other people's territory, and their attitude was so tough in the end. It was inevitable that people would feel uneasy. However, for Wu Ming, his companions were the most important. As long as they didn't make any big mistakes, if Wu Ming had the ability, he wouldn't mind covering up for his companions. After all, you couldn't expect a problem child to correct his mistakes. Therefore, weakness was the original sin. This was still the case where Wu Ming gave face to the other party. If it was White Yiksha's people who caused such a disaster, Mandela would probably turn a blind eye. Wu Ming's request with a threatening attitude made Mandela very uncomfortable, but he already knew that the other party was a powerhouse who was not weaker than White Yiksha, so his attitude needed to be slightly changed. As early as when he rushed over, he saw Wu Ming with this group of criminals, so they must be a group. But since the military police had already come out, there was no reason to return without any results. It would be too embarrassing. However, it was still possible to turn a blind eye to it now. As suspects, the two of them must go to Salamandra, with our military police. Without any superfluous words, Mandela put forward his bottom line. Of course. Wu Ming nodded. Since the other party gave him face, Wu Ming naturally wouldn't refuse. Letting Black Rabbit and 16 Knights go back with Salamandra was a small punishment for the two. Although it was impossible to learn from going back to the 16 Knights, it was impossible. Then please. Chapter 631. Wu Ming brought Black Rabbit and 16 Knights with him and followed Mandela's military police to Salamandra's base. Wu Ming didn't care about the destruction of the bell towers that were fixed in the air by Wu Ming's telekinesis. This became the scene of the fire dragon's birth ceremony, attracting many people to come and see the falling objects hanging in the air. It could be considered a blessing in disguise. With Wu Ming's telekinesis, It wouldn't affect anything if he just controlled the falling objects from Salamandra's base. Therefore Wu-Ming didn't care about it for the time being. Let the falling objects stay in the air and deal with the matter in front of him first. Salamandra's conference room, on the wide rectangular conference table. Shadora sat at the head of the table, Mandela sat on Shadora's left, and White Yaksha sat on Shadora's right. On both sides of the three sat a few higher-ups of Salamandra, but it was obvious that they were all gathered together. When Wu-Ming first met White Yaksha, only Shadora and Mandela accompanied him. In other words, only Mandela and Shadora were the real higher-ups, and the others weren't considered higher-ups. Or rather, they were Mandela's trusted aides. And for this meeting with no name, Mandela pulled a few of his trusted aides over. After all, when facing no name, only Shadora and Mandela were there, it was inevitable that it would be rude. From Mandela's point of view, among the two powerhouses present, White Yaksha was obviously leaning towards no name, and Wu-Ming was completely on the side of no name, so he had to treat no name with caution. Even if Mandela looked down on the other side as a community, Mandela still had to be polite. On the seat opposite Shadora, Ren, the leader of no name, sat there. On the way here with Salamandra, Wu-Ming and the others happened to see Ren with a helpless and slightly panicked face, so Wu-Ming brought their leader over. However, inexplicably starting a meeting with Salamandra made Ren quite nervous. The other members of no name sat on both sides of Ren. On Ren's left was Wu-Ming, and on his right was 16 knights. It had to be said that 16 knights, as a suspect, was able to sit here was thanks to Wu-Ming. Otherwise, with Mandela who looked down on no name, 16 knights who was of low birth and caused trouble would be punished by Mandela. Although Mandela would probably be taught a lesson by 16th knight. Immediately on 16 knights' right side sat Jiuyuasu and Sat. Good heavens, this is a group of problem children. Although Jiuyuasu Ants brought Letitia to go shopping, when Wu-Ming found Ren he also found the three of them. After all, it was not easy for the members of no name to gather, so Wu-Ming did not give Jiuyuasu Ants a chance to go shopping. Instead, he let Letitia bring the two of them to follow Wu-Ming to Salamandra's base. After all, no name still had to talk with Salamandra. As for Letitia and Black Rabbit, they sat on Wu-Ming's left side. Although Black Rabbit and 16 knights got into trouble together, but with the name of Hakata nobility, even Mandela did not want to pursue the responsibility of Black Rabbit as a moon rabbit. It had to be said that the Hakata nobility, the moon rabbit race, was really a jack of all trades in the Hakata world. No matter who it was, they would have respect for the moon rabbit race. Therefore, even if Black Rabbit was a member of no name, Salamandra still easily forgave her. Finally, there was Letitia. Although Letitia considered herself as Wu-Ming's maid in no name, but to outsiders no one would think of Letitia as a maid. If a tiger was full it would not hurt you, but would you really dare to sleep next to a tiger? You would be scared to death. This analogy was very apt for Letitia. Even if Letitia was a maid, they would only think that it was the bad taste of the owner who owned Letitia. They would not dare to really see Letitia as a maid. Let's not talk about ordering her around. If you let a 4-digit person stand in front of Salamandra, a 5-digit person listen to people talk, even if Letitia would agree, would Salamandra dare to do so? A 4-digit person was a 4-digit person, belonging to the upper echelons of Hakata. As a 4-digit person, Letitia completely had the qualifications to sit next to Wu-Ming. And Letitia also understood this principle, so under Wu-Ming's instructions she sat next to Wu-Ming. Seeing that everyone was present as the host, Shadora spoke. Regarding the destruction of the sacrificial bell tower by Mr. 16 Knights and Miss Black Rabbit, because there were no casualties and the street was not damaged, Salamandra decided not to pursue the matter. However, the price is that no name will be responsible for repairing the damaged bell tower. Does no name have any objections? Shadora first made a ruling on the disaster caused by the actions of Black Rabbit and 16 Knights. But as Shadora said, because there were basically no losses, no name only needed to repair the bell tower. In this regard, Mandela had no objections. After all, even if he didn't give face to no name, he had to give face to White Yaksha and Wu-Ming, right? One was the person who led no name here, and the other was a powerful person in the no name community. Even if he wanted to throw a tantrum he had to hold it in. No name has no objections to Salamandra's decision. This sentence was said by Ren. After all, if the communication between communities was not spoken by someone other than Ren, it would inevitably cause the community to lose face. Wu-Ming and 16 Knights knew this, so they didn't speak. However, when 16 Knights saw Ren's body trembling slightly due to nervousness, he gently patted Ren's back. Ren glanced at 16 Knights, and under 16 Knights' trusting smile, Ren gradually overcame his fear. With a big brother like 16 Knights, Wuming didn't need to comfort Ren. The problem of Black Rabbit and 16 Knights' destruction had come to an end, so next should be the main event. Then, regarding the birth of the Fire Dragon and the Demon King's attack, do you have any preparations? Wuming took the lead to open the door to this topic, but this surprised Ren and Black Rabbit. Mr. Villo, why did you? Black Rabbit wanted to say something but stopped. Clearly, Black Rabbit was concerned about why Wuming exposed this information. Because Salamandra must have known about this long ago. Am I right, White Yiksha? Chapter 632. Wuming said as he looked at White Yiksha. Villo is right. The higher-ups of Salamandra already know about this. White Yiksha nodded slowly. This wasn't hard to understand. After all, the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony was organized by White Yiksha and Salamandra together. It didn't make sense that White Yiksha knew about the Demon King's attack, but Salamandra didn't. After White Yiksha knew about the prophecy of the Demon King's attack, he first looked for the organizer of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, Salamandra. However, in order to not cause panic, very few people in Salamandra knew about this. It should be said that the only people in Salamandra who knew about this were Shadora, Mandela, and a few of Mandela's trusted aides. Because of this, the members of Salamandra did not show any signs of surprise. However, a few of Mandela's trusted aides were surprised by Wuming's bluntness in revealing this secret. No matter what, the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony and the Demon King's attack was already a secret. If others heard about it, it would be troublesome. In the worst case, the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony would be destroyed before it was even held. However, since you know that the Demon King's attack will happen during the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, why don't you just cancel the ceremony? Jiu Yuanfei asked. That's right. The Demon King's attack was so serious that people would die. So why continue to hold the ceremony? Was it because of a matter of reputation? After all, canceling the ceremony would affect the reputation of the community. Of course it's not that simple, Yuanfei. White Yiksha explained to Jiu Yuanfei. Although in the eyes of others, Salamandra was completely capable of bearing the price of a failed Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, no one wanted to lose out. Furthermore, it would be foolish to choose his own reputation in such a situation. White Yiksha could not hold the ceremony with such a community. If that was the case, White Yiksha would have left long ago. However, White Yiksha's words made everyone feel awkward. Although canceling the ceremony is the wisest choice under such circumstances, the reason why Salamandra didn't cancel the ceremony is really related to its reputation. White Yiksha's words stunned No Name, including Wuming and 16 Knights. They really didn't think that it was really a matter of reputation this time. Then, Wuming looked at White Yiksha, who was looking at them with mischievous interest. In other words, Salamandra cannot be cancelled, or rather it cannot be cancelled. We must continue with this ceremony, Wuming suddenly said. If I'm not wrong, the reason why it can't be cancelled should be related to the name of the Fire Dragon birth ceremony. At this moment, 16th Knights reacted in time and followed Wuming's words. That's right. The Fire Dragon birth ceremony is a celebration for Shadora's birth, so it can't be cancelled. Mandela nodded. However, Black Rabbit and the others couldn't understand Mandela's words. It was a rare celebration to commemorate Shadora's birth. Couldn't it be cancelled? Shadora wasn't some super powerful or super famous big shot? If only it was really a ceremony for Shadora's birth. Wuming shook his head. White Yiksha spoke again. Shadora inherited the position of the leader of the Salamandra community and also inherited the position of the North District Stratum ruler. Stratum ruler? This shocked Black Rabbit, Ren Jiuyuasuka and Kasumi. Could it be that Shadora, who looked so young and weak, was a super strong being? After all, if she wasn't a powerhouse, she wouldn't be able to inherit the position of the Stratum ruler and protect the North District. The Stratum ruler in the North District isn't what you think it is. Wuming interrupted their shock. The Stratum ruler in the North District is a position inherited by many people. Basically, they are some regional Stratum rulers and outer sect Stratum rulers. How did Mr. Villo know? Black Rabbit was confused. Wuming was clearly acting like an otaku during this period. How could he know more than a local like her? The underground library of No Name recorded that the Stratum rulers in the North District have always been like this. This made everyone understand once again that knowledge was power. Mr. Villo is right. In order to help Shadora consolidate her position as one of the Stratum rulers, this fire dragon birth ceremony must continue. It can't be stopped, White Yiksha added. It's because the other Stratum rulers in the North District aren't willing to help this little girl hold the fire dragon birth ceremony together. That's why we were invited by Salamandra to hold the fire dragon birth ceremony together. Although it sounded a little cruel, it seemed to be a matter of course. An 11-year-old girl who hadn't even reached adulthood yet sat directly in the seat that the upper class had spent a lot of effort to sit in. Anyone would feel that it was unfair. Moreover, because of the harsh environment in the North District, the other Stratum rulers in the North District were people who wouldn't wake up early if there were no benefits. Therefore, they directly rejected Shadora's invitation. That was something that couldn't be helped. Of course, the so-called wouldn't wake up early if there were no benefits was only compared to the East District. It wasn't that bad. It was just a little evil compared to the East District. After all, if there were so many kind-hearted people, the Stratum rulers wouldn't have been able to develop to their current level in the North District. And they wouldn't have been able to discover that the Stratum rulers wouldn't be able to become Stratum rulers because they didn't have any backing. It was impossible for them to become Stratum rulers with their own strength. It could only be said that the strong preyed on the weak. Just like Mandela. Although he was quite ruthless to others, he still loved his Stratum rulers. Just like how he treated No Name. Because continuing to form an alliance with a nameless Stratum ruler would damage his reputation, he directly kicked No Name away. This was the law of the jungle. No Name was weak and wasn't qualified to be their ally. So, out of good intentions, White Yiksha organized the festival with the people from the North District. After all, due to the distance, cross-district cooperation festivals weren't common. Therefore, they were puzzled when they learned that White Yiksha was holding a festival with the people from the North District. Now, everyone understood why White Yiksha would suddenly cross districts to hold a festival with people from other districts. You're really a good person, White Yiksha. 16 knights praised White Yiksha with a laugh. However, the praise of a problematic child made White Yiksha's hair stand on end. Then White Yiksha continued the topic. Since Salamandra can't cancel the festival, we can only find another way. If retreat doesn't work, then we'll fight head-on. This was what White Yiksha meant. Chapter 633. In other words, you've chosen the path of dealing with the Demon King, right? 16 Knights said casually as he leaned back in his seat. But that's a Demon King? Black Rabbit seemed to recall what happened to No Name 3 years ago, and his face darkened. Isn't that simple? If a Demon King attacks and doesn't choose to retreat, then just find a powerhouse who can definitely kill the Demon King. Wu Ming's tone was also quite casual. And coincidentally, White Yiksha, the ruler of the East District's hierarchy who organized the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony with Salamandra, is such a powerhouse. Am I right, White Yiksha? With that, Wu Ming looked at White Yiksha. That's right. White Yiksha suddenly opened his fan and made a classic White Yiksha pose of covering the lower half of his face with his fan. Because Lord White Yiksha is known to be the strongest among the lower ranks, so with Lord White Yiksha in charge, we, Salamandra, are very assured. Shadora continued White Yiksha's words. Hearing Shadora's words, White Yiksha seemed to be quite proud, with a proud smile on his face and puffed out his chest. But the lowly was still a lowly without a chest. Therefore it was precisely because Salamandra knew the strength of his ally White Yiksha, that it was impossible for a Demon King to be able to defeat White Yiksha. Therefore, after Salamandra learned of this news, he did not cancel the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. Instead he asked his ally White Yiksha to help him deal with the unknown Demon King. And White Yiksha, whether it was out of responsibility as the ruler of the hierarchy or because of their relationship as allies, White Yiksha would help. Then you came to us for insurance, right, White Yiksha? After Wu Ming knew what had happened, he understood why White Yiksha asked No Name to join the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony when it was about to begin. At first, everyone's guess was not wrong. No Name had the slogan to defeat the Demon King and was a community that specialized in fighting the Demon King. Therefore White Yiksha chose No Name. But there was a more important reason, and that was insurance. Previously, when White Yiksha was looking for No Name, Wu Ming was showing off his power to White Yiksha. He said, when you come into contact with the Demon King, that Demon King will be defeated by us, the ruler of the strongest class. He had said something to White Yiksha. Since they dared to attack the ceremony despite knowing that you were there, they must have a way to deal with you. You must have thought of this, which is why you came to us, right? Wu Ming repeated. Of course. I am confident, but I am not conceited. The situation you speak of is naturally within my consideration. White Yiksha revealed a hint of pride. This made Rin, Black Rabbit, and Shadora, who were more gullible, look at White Yiksha with admiration. This made Wu Ming smile helplessly. She didn't know if it was because of her current lowly state, but Bayasha was a little childish. Actually, I didn't have much hope for no name. At this moment, Mandela suddenly spoke and attracted everyone's attention. But since no name has someone like Servillo, it's naturally not a problem to be invited by White Yiksha-sama. After personally witnessing Wu Ming's power, Mandela respected Wu Ming. As a member of the Northern District, he didn't have the slightest resistance to the weak respecting the strong, even if Wu Ming was someone he offended and taught a lesson to. However, Mandela's words made the 3 problem children, 16 Knights, Flying Bird, and Yao, unhappy. He said it as if they only needed Wu Ming and didn't need anyone else. How could the extremely conceited 3 problem children calm down? In other words, you think that no name completely relies on Villo? Jiyuan Flying Bird crossed her arms and looked at Mandela. Although Villo's contribution to no name is not small, we are not weak, Haruai Hiroyuki said with a frown. You bastard, do you want to try my fist? Reverse 16 Knight said, revealing his fist. No need, no name, only needs to send Servillo. Mandela directly rejected the 3 problem children's request. In his opinion, these people were just weaklings who only knew how to cause trouble and weren't worthy of his attention. However, if they wanted to offend him, he didn't mind teaching them a lesson. As a result, Mandela's words angered the 3 problem children. Then why don't you have a taste of our power? 16 Knights laughed. After 16 Knights finished speaking, Haruai Hiroyuki, who was already prepared, stepped on the air and instantly rushed towards Mandela. Mandela, who was already prepared, pulled out the sword at his waist and prepared to meet the opponent's attack. Suddenly, a spell was chanted and Mandela felt that he couldn't move. Stop for me. Jiyuan Flying Bird's eyes were like an eagle's as she stared at Mandela. Fortunately, this power only lasted for a second before it disappeared. Mandela thought that he had broken free, but in fact, it was just Jiyuan Flying Bird canceling her control over Mandela. After learning about her gift, Jiyuan Flying Bird's ability improved greatly in just one night, as if she had an epiphany, and 1 second was enough for her to control Mandela. This was because 1 second was enough for Haruai Hiroyuki to achieve his goal. Bang! In an instant, Mandela was directly sent flying by Haruai Hiroyuki's kick and hit the wall. Haruai Hiroyuki did a somersault in the air and stood gracefully on the table. What? This shocked Shadora and the higher-ups of Salamandra, who were Mandela's confidants. Smoke and dust filled Mandela's body as he struggled to stand up and looked at Haruai Hiroyuki with some anger. No name. Mandela roared. Then Mandela's pupils began to dilate involuntarily because 16 Knights had already rushed in front of him and raised his ordinary fist. However, this ordinary fist gave Mandela a sense of danger and even death, which was why Mandela's pupils shrank. That's enough, boy. Suddenly, Byakuya spoke and 16 Knights' fist stopped in front of Mandela. Boom. This was the sound of the impact caused by 16 Knights' fist. Although it stopped in time, the strong airflow still hit Mandela's hair and clothes, making rustling sounds. Then the wall behind Mandela collapsed. Rumble. Chapter 634. Half and half. White Yiksha waved the fan in front of him. It's embarrassing for me to participate in the event in the North District alone. It's not a bad idea to find some people. Also, as Villo said, if the other party has a way to restrain me, then Villo's role will be revealed. After White Yiksha finished speaking, everyone fell into deep thought. Especially Black Rabbit and Ren, their gazes towards Wu Ming were already filled with reverence. No matter where the strong were, they would be admired by others. Whether it was Wu Ming's intelligence that was comparable to or even surpassed 16 Knights, his extremely powerful strength, the various treasures and items that he constantly took out, and the ability to freely travel between worlds, Ren and Black Rabbit already knew that Wu Ming was a very strong person based on these 4 aspects. Not to mention, White Yiksha had vaguely placed Wu Ming on the same level as her. Also, through the verbal exchange with White Yiksha, they could see that Wu Ming's strength was not weaker than White Yiksha's. As for being stronger than White Yiksha, the 2 of them did not dare to think about it. As expected, little brother, you and this kimono loli are both super strong. 16 knights laughed unrestrainedly. Why did 16 knights, who liked to fight against the strong, endure so many times? Because his instinct told him that whether it was White Yaksha or Wuming, they were not people he could match now. 16 knights was not afraid of failure, but he liked to save the best dishes for last. Therefore, 16 knights was not in a hurry to fight Wuming and White Yaksha. However, White Yaksha was slightly impatient. Enough idle chatter. Are you going to the fire dragon's birth ceremony in the North District? Give me an answer. White Yaksha folded the paper fan and slapped his thigh. Yes, of course. Why wouldn't I go? 16 Knights, an activist, immediately gave an answer. Wait, Mr. 16 Knights. Black Rabbit frowned and looked at 16 Knights. They were going to face the Demon King. Was it really okay to agree so hastily? Even if there were two strong people here, White Yaksha and Villo, they would not be able to answer so quickly. At this moment, Ren, who was beside Black Rabbit, shook his head at Black Rabbit. Forget it, Black Rabbit, let's do as 16th Knight says. Even young Master Ren. Black Rabbit was shocked. After all, we are a community whose slogan is to defeat the Demon King. Besides, we have Villo, 16 Knights and the others. I believe that nothing will happen. Ren looked excited. Moreover, the Fire Dragon birth ceremony is a ceremony jointly held by the North and East districts. There will definitely be many gift competitions with rich prizes. Now is the time for No Name to develop. If we can win those gift competitions, we will be able to obtain a large number of gifts. This will be of great help to the development of the community. After hearing Ren's words, Wuming and 16 Knights couldn't help but glance at Ren twice. As the leader of the community, Ren was already starting to look like one. Indeed. Don't forget that for Flying Bird's gift to be effective, it needs a lot of gifts as support. Moreover, if we can find a high-level gift that is suitable for Flying Bird to use, then we can solve the problem of Flying Bird's gift. Letitia also mentioned the benefits of participating in the Fire Dragon birth ceremony. That's right. Taking advantage of this great ceremony, I must solve the problem of my gift. Jiyuan Flying Bird had an expression that said, "If I don't go to hell, who will?" Immediately after, Ren's face showed that he couldn't bear it and spoke again. Actually, I don't want anyone to be like our community and have their name, flag and companions taken away. Therefore, in summary, please forgive me as the leader for being willful, Black Rabbit. Hearing Ren's heartfelt words, Black Rabbit's worried heart was relieved. Really, young Master Ren has also grown. Black Rabbit couldn't help but feel happy for the growth of the community leader. That's why you rabbit. Suddenly, Wuming's voice came from behind Black Rabbit. Immediately after, the Black Rabbit felt its ears being grabbed by two hands. Why? How could a mere Black Rabbit win against Wuming? Wuming used a little force and Black Rabbit couldn't hold on. Woo! Black Rabbit let out a strange cry, but Wuming acted as if he didn't hear it and continued to ravage Black Rabbit's ears. Wuming's mouth didn't stay idle either as he ravaged Black Rabbit's ears while speaking. Although I'm now a spirit, my strength hasn't been weakened by much. Since I've already joined No Name, then you just need to work hard toward the goal you want to move forward because... Wuming paused, then let go of the hands that were grabbing Black Rabbit's ears, which made Black Rabbit's expression relax slightly. Then Wuming touched Black Rabbit's head while walking away. You have me behind you. An extremely plain sentence made No Name, including 16th Knight and the other two, feel incomparably reliable. Then White Yaksha smiled. In that case you can go back. The Fire Dragon's birth ceremony will officially start in 3 days. However, White Yaksha's words made 16th Knight slightly unhappy. Then can't we go in advance, White Yaksha? 16th Knight showed a presumptuous look. Jiao Yuao and Haruai Hiroyuki were also slightly moved. I'm already looking forward to it. It shouldn't be a big deal to go in advance. This group of problematic children couldn't wait for one night, so how could they wait for another 3 days? This made White Yaksha feel a little helpless. They were indeed problematic children. Alright then, I'll help you wait for a while and send you over directly. Then White Yaksha put down his fan, spread out his palms and clapped twice. At that moment, Wuming felt a slight fluctuation in space. Okay, we've arrived at the North District, White Yaksha said. Eh? We're here already? Black Rabbit was clearly stunned, clearly unable to react. Don't lie to us, White Yaksha. Jiao Yuao narrowed her eyes at White Yaksha, clearly suspicious of him. Although I don't think you're lying to us, you still can't be trusted. Uruai Hiroyuki nodded. White Yiksha wasn't angry but smiled slightly. Let's just go out and take a look. White Yiksha picked up his folding fan and covered the lower half of his face. Then everyone stood up and walked out. As soon as they walked out of What's shop, what greeted No Name's eyes was no longer the original East District, but a city with a different style from the East District. This is the North District, everyone, White Yiksha announced. Chapter 635. Mandela was injured. Although it wasn't serious, the fact that a mere No Name could injure Mandela from Salamandra was enough to make Mandela's subordinates, who were the so-called higher-ups, extremely surprised. No Name left in a hurry. Renha Bunny had an apologetic and helpless expression as he pulled 16 knights, Jiyoyuki, and Kasuga Hikari away in a hurry. Wuming and Letitia were left behind to deal with the trifles caused by the three problem children. The higher-ups of Salamandra were frightened by the fleeting strength of No Name. In addition, the decision was in the hands of Shadora and Mandela, so they didn't think about how to deal with this incident. Mandela was quite embarrassed because he felt the threat of death, so he wanted to severely punish No Name and the group of problem children who didn't respect etiquette and directly attacked. However, because Mandela's skills were inferior and he lost despite being on guard, Mandela was too embarrassed to be ruthless. However, the most important thing was still the leader of the Salamandra community, Shadora. Although Shadora was young, she was still the leader of Salamandra. Shadora was quite dissatisfied with Mandela's provocative words towards No Name before. In Shadora's opinion, this incident was completely instigated by her brother. Therefore, Shadora suppressed her brother and wasn't prepared to let No Name pay any compensation. Mandela naturally didn't agree, but after being glared at by his sister, he immediately compromised. However, Wuming, who was left behind to deal with the mess caused by the three problem children and clean up their mess, was a little embarrassed. After all, when 16 knights and the others attacked Mandela, Shadora and the other members of Salamandra didn't react in time. Without Wuming, why would White Yiksha let them do as they pleased was another important reason. Therefore, Wuming used his ability to create high-grade items to help repair the wall and the damaged floor, tables and chairs. After all, the creation of high-level props was not something like projection magic. Therefore, ordinary walls, tables and chairs, the finished products created by silent sound would not disappear. Then, because of Mandela's injury, he left early. After Shadora and the higher-ups of Salamandra had a short discussion with Wuming, because she was worried about her brother's injury, Shadora ended the meeting. After all, when the three problem children attacked Mandela, the meeting had already collapsed. If it weren't for White Yiksha and Wuming's support, as well as Shadora's understanding, this would have turned into a war between Salamandra and No Name. Shadora said, "Feel free to do whatever you want in Salamandra." Then she left with the higher-ups of Salamandra. Then when White Yiksha and Letitia were about to leave, Wuming called out. Wuming stopped him. "Wait, Vero." White Yiksha and Letitia were both White Yiksha and Letitia White Yiksha. Wuming, who sat down, looked at White Yiksha, who was sitting leisurely on her chair. "What's wrong, White Yiksha? Is there anything else?" "I just want to tell you that although Mandela looks like a villain, he is very considerate of Shadora and Salamandra, so—" White Yiksha didn't finish, but Wuming understood what she meant. White Yiksha didn't expect Wuming to let go of his prejudices, but at the very least he shouldn't delay dealing with the Demon King because of Mandela. After all, the Demon King was a disaster to the entire 54545 outer sect. Death was considered light. Although White Yiksha had previously said that the Demon King would soon be defeated by him, White Yiksha was still very worried. Even if Wuming and No Name were here, she was still worried. White Yiksha had a strong love for the people of the lower class, just like how she loved her own people. She didn't want anyone to be sacrificed. "Don't worry, I'm not that childish." Wuming laughed because of White Yiksha's words. "I will pay more attention to the people at this fire dragon's birth ceremony. I will definitely not let anything happen to them. You just wait for the Demon King to attack and deal with the Demon King, White Yiksha." Wuming smiled encouragingly, then stood up and walked toward the door. Letitia followed Wuming to the door. The moment Wuming went out, Letitia turned her head. "Master will definitely be fine, Lord White Yiksha." Letitia bowed slightly to White Yiksha, then left the room and closed the door. "Really, your confidence makes me feel a little hot-blooded," White Yiksha said as if she had a headache, but the curve of her mouth proved that she was calm at the moment. Wuming and Letitia quickly walked out of Salamandra's door. Then he realized that the rest of No Name were sitting in a small shop near Salamandra's base. Black Rabbit, who had been paying attention to Salamandra's door, smiled when she saw Wuming and Letitia come out. She waved at Wuming. The others also noticed Wuming and Letitia's figures. Without a doubt they were waiting for Wuming. "Why are you waiting for me?" Wuming smiled helplessly and walked into the small shop. "After all, it's already very late. Everyone discussed that we should find a hotel together after you and Letitia come out," said Ren, who was the leader. "But it's basically impossible to find one," 16 Knights said casually as if he was trying to ruin the scene. Then he was fiercely glared at by Black Rabbit. However, 16 Knights ignored her and continued to do as he pleased. "But 16 Knights is right. With such a lively festival, I'm afraid the hotel is already full." Letitia, who was standing behind Wuming, supported 16 Knights' words. As an old senior, Letitia knew a lot about how to deal with people. It wasn't strange that such a festival would cause the hotel to be full. However, this made Ren's expression difficult. Originally, they were brought here by White Yaksha to work together with Salamandra. In theory, they should have asked White Yaksha to make arrangements for them, or just stay in Salamandra. However, because of the impulsiveness of the 3 problem children, they were embarrassed to continue staying there. "Really, Mr. 16 Knights, Miss Flying Bird, and Miss Yao, you are too impulsive." Black Rabbit, who had already taught the 3 problem children a lesson, spoke again and began to teach the 3 problem children a lesson. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. However, the 3 problem children did not take Black Rabbit's lesson to heart. "The 3 of you." Black Rabbit was angry again. In order to prevent Black Rabbit from crying again because of the 3 problem children, Wuming made a suggestion. "Then let's go back to No Name to stay." Eh? Chapter 636. Eastern District 2105380 Outer Gate, No Name Base. The castle-like residence that belonged to No Name was sturdy and brand new. Next to it was a large pond filled with clean water. Around the house, there was a large area of cultivated land. One after another, stone golems like scarecrows stood guard at the edge of the cultivated land. In the backyard and inside the house, there were many golems with delicate bodies doing housework. Washing clothes, sweeping the floor, mopping the floor, these golems could do it all. The only thing that the golems couldn't do was cook, but under the careful command of Lily and the others, the golems were able to make good food. It had to be said that the golems summoned by Wuming's item were quite powerful. They were able to do such delicate work. On the large area of land outside the house, the children of No Name were commanding a large number of golems to do farm work. Wuming had already given the golem summoning item to Ren. With Wuming's help and improved the summoning item, Ren had successfully used his own gift to control the item and summon golems given by Wuming. Ren had also given the command of the golems to every member of No Name, including the children. Because of the golems' meticulous work, this greatly reduced the burden on the children of No Name. Servillo's item is really convenient. That's right. I can sleep well every day now. That's right, and the golem's cooking is also not bad. Our community has finally begun to rise again. The children were chatting here and there. However, as the leader of the group, the little fox girl Lily had a serious expression on her face. Although the golems are useful, you can't rely on them too much. That will make you lazy. Also, not everything can be done by the golems. As the support team, we have to continue to work hard. Yes, it had to be said that as the children who survived the Demon King's attack and were still able to survive in No Name, they were all quite well behaved. At least compared to the problem children of No Name, the 100 or so children of No Name could be considered as angels. Well then, let's continue to work hard, Lily said with a smile and wagging her tail. Yes, seeing that everyone was working hard, Lily decided to leave as well. She wanted to check on the progress of the magic puppets in the house in the backyard. Arriving at the door, Lily pushed open the door and walked in. However, when Lily walked in, she was stunned. Why is everyone here? Lily asked when she saw Wuming's group standing in the hall. Didn't everyone go to White Yaksha to understand the situation? Why did you suddenly come back? Lily then wagged her tail and fell into deep thought. I don't remember anyone coming back. Ahem. Lily, it's actually like this. Wuming cleared his throat and began to explain. Without wasting too much time, Wuming gave Lily a brief account of what had happened. In other words, you went to the North District with Lord White Yaksha, Lily said enviously. Actually, I also want to go to the North District to take a look. Wu Ming, Black Rabbit, and the others didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But thinking about it, it was normal. After all, although Lily was a small leader, she was still a child. How could a child not be interested in playing? Okay, I'll bring you along when I go tomorrow. Wu Ming patted Lily's head and comforted her. The reason why Wu Ming and the rest of the no-name could arrive at the no-name base so quickly was because Wu Ming used the teleportation portal. There was only one requirement for the teleportation portal, and that was, as long as it was a place they had seen or been to, they could connect to it. Therefore, even if the North District and the East District were quite far apart, with Wu Ming's bug-like skill, it could be said that it was not weak at all. Therefore, when the no-name people were worried about finding a hotel, Wu Ming directly proposed to open the teleportation portal and return directly to no-name. As a result, before Lily entered the house, Wu Ming and the others had already returned to no-name. And just now, when Wu Ming explained to Lily, he also said that they used the teleportation portal to return, so Lily was not surprised that Wu Ming said it was so easy. Then it's settled, Lily smiled happily. After that, everyone enjoyed dinner, took a bath and went to rest. As for Wu Ming, he went to check the situation of the magic puppets. After all, Wu Ming had never used this item before. Although Wu Ming didn't think that there would be any problems with the item he made, it was still better to check it. After all, it was just to be safe. After checking that there were no problems, Wu Ming went to the library. This made Letitia a little helpless. Master, haven't you seen enough? She thought that this exploration of the Fire Dragon's birth festival would make her master obediently go to sleep, but in the end, there was still no change. Although I've read a lot of books in the no-name underground library, there are still a lot of books that I care about, so I'll take a look at them. This was what Wu Ming told Letitia. But as a maid, Letitia had to think about her master's health, so she had to let her master sleep. Even if her master was a monster who didn't sleep for a few years, she still had to do it. This was a very reasonable request that Letitia the maid Letitia put forward for her master's sake. Because of Letitia's strong advice, Wu Ming only read a little bit of books before simply going back to his room to sleep. After all, Wu Ming had basically finished reading the most important books. The rest of the books weren't the most important, but Wu Ming cared about the most, so there was no need to rush. At night in no name, everyone fell asleep. Only the magic puppets that didn't sleep, their scarlet eyes flashed in the night, protecting no name, this paradise that had finally regained its vitality. The next morning, everyone finished their breakfast and gathered in the no-name conference room. Wu Ming, Letitia, 16 Nights Reversal, Jyoyuasuka, Haruai Hiroyuki, Ren, Lily, and Sanmao Cat, a total of 8 people and 1 cat, neatly finished their preparations. Lily, have you informed the other children of no-name? Wu Ming looked at Lily. Yes, I've already informed them. We'll leave no-name today and go to the North District. Lily nodded, her little tail wagging. She was obviously excited about going to the North District. Wu Ming nodded. Then everyone, let's begin our trip to the North District again. After saying that, a dark purple portal swallowed everyone. In a moment, the conference room became empty. Chapter 637. North District, 54545 Outer Gate. Whether it was the people on the street or the people in the shops, they were all immersed in the joyous atmosphere brought about by the festival. They didn't notice that there was a dark purple ripple in a small alley somewhere. Suddenly, a foot stepped out of the dark purple ripple. Then the owner of the foot completely came out of the ripple. He had black hair and red eyes. His face wasn't very handsome, but it was quite pleasing to the eye. Then one person after another came out of the dark purple ripple. Have we already reached the North District? Among them, a young girl with fox ears and a fox tail spoke with an excited tone as she constantly looked around. That's right, we've already reached the North District. Lily can go shopping with Black Rabbit and the others. Wu Ming, who came out first, squatted down and touched Lily's little head. Villo-san, don't we need to continue the discussion with Salamandra? Black Rabbit's ears perked up. She was very confused. What the Black Rabbit said wasn't wrong. Yesterday, the discussion between No Name and Salamandra was interrupted by the 3 problematic children. Although Wu Ming and Letitia stayed behind, they were only there to deal with the trifling matters caused by the willfulness of the 3 problematic children. Thus, regarding the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony and the Demon King's attack, Salamandra and No Name did not come to a conclusion. We do need to, but don't worry. I've already talked to Shadora and Byakuya. Today we don't need all of No Name's people to go to Salamandra for the meeting. We only need to send a few people. Wu-Ming explained to Black Rabbit. So that's how it is. Then we can go shopping. Jiao Feinyao smiled. She didn't have enough shopping yesterday. Otherwise, she wouldn't have continued shopping with Haruai and Letitia after leaving Wu-Ming's punishment area. You girls can go shopping today. Today we boys will go to Salamandra to continue our discussion. We girls are going shopping? Black Rabbit seemed a little hesitant. However, whether it was Jiao Feinyao, Haruai Hiroyuki, or even Lily, their eyes lit up. Then Wu-Ming looked at the only two boys other than himself, Reverse 16 Knights and Rin Russell. As the leader of the community, I naturally have this obligation. Although Rin was a little nervous, he still took on the responsibility of being the leader. This is really troublesome. But if you want me to go shopping with a bunch of girls, please forgive me. Reverse 16 Knights showed a helpless expression. He also agreed to Wu-Ming's suggestion. After that, Wu-Ming suddenly looked at Letitia, who was following behind him. Letitia's there too, there's no need to follow us. Eh? Letitia was stunned. But this is Master's first order. Go shopping with Black Rabbit and the others. Wu-Ming placed his hand on Letitia's head and smiled. Since it was the Master's order, there was no way to refuse. Yes, my master. Letitia smiled in response to Wu-Ming. Suddenly Letitia was pulled away. Then Jiao Feinyao's voice was heard. Then I'll leave the rest to you guys. Jiao Feinyao was holding Black Rabbit in one hand and Letitia in the other. Together with Haruai Hiroyuki and Lily, they hurriedly ran out of the alley. Rin, Mr. Villo, Mr. 16 Knights, I'll leave it to you guys. Lily turned back and waved at Wu-Ming and the other two. Please. Haruai Hiroyuki also turned back and said, Don't worry, leave it to me. 16 Knights replied arrogantly and confidently. Wu-Ming also patted Ren's shoulder, who was a little nervous, and smiled confidently at the girls who were leaving. However, not every girl was as open-minded as Jiao Feinyao and Hiroyuki. Wait a minute, I think it's better if I go with them? Black Rabbit said in a panic. After all, this was related to the cooperation between their community and Salamandra. Black Rabbit, who wanted to do everything by herself, naturally felt a little uncomfortable going shopping under these circumstances. Let's go, you stupid rabbit. Villo and 16th Knights will do it well. Jiao Feinyao and Haruai Hiroyuki each held Black Rabbit's arm, making it impossible for Black Rabbit to break free. Wait a minute. The pitiful Black Rabbit had already forgotten that its strength was actually above the two girls. Okay, let's hurry to Salamandra's base. If we're early, maybe we can go shopping too. Hearing Wu-Ming's words, Reverse 16 Knights grinned. You're right. Yesterday we were only focused on playing hide and seek with Black Rabbit. We didn't have time to go shopping. However, whether it was Rin or Wu-Ming, both of them were helpless against Reverse 16 Knights. This so-called hide-and-seek caused quite a bit of panic on the streets. At this time, Rin suddenly remembered something. Speaking of which, the clock tower destroyed by 16th Knights and Black Rabbit hasn't been repaired yet. Rin said as he looked at Villo. After all, Villo had already taken on the task of repairing it yesterday, but after coming out of Salamandra, they all returned to the East District. In this way, Wu-Ming, who was in the East District, was disconnected from the telekinesis that controlled the clock tower wreckage in the North District. This made Rin panic. Don't worry, before I left yesterday, I cast a magic spell on the clock tower wreckage that was fixed in the air. Even if I disconnected the telekinesis, the wreckage would still be fixed in the air. There won't be any second damage from the wreckage falling down. Although Wu-Ming was confident in his telekinesis, he was still a little worried. After all, the East District and the North District were almost a world apart. What if they were too far apart and the telekinesis was disconnected? Therefore, before Wu-Ming left, Wu-Ming used his telekinesis to cast a few Lune runes on the clock tower wreckage, allowing the telekinesis to continue automatically. This way, the clock tower wreckage that was fixed in the air would not fall down because of Wu-Ming breaking the telekinesis link. Now, Wu-Ming, who returned to the North District, reconnected with the clock tower wreckage. It turned out that Wu-Ming was right. The wreckage was still fixed in the air. It had to be said that Lune runes were more effective than direct combat runes in other places. However, he couldn't always let the wreckage float in the air, even if it became a landscape. After all, it seemed a bit out of place in the Fire Dragon birth ceremony. In short, let's go to the base of Salamandra first, then I will repair the clock tower. Chapter 638. After that, Wu-Ming, 16 knights, and Ren Russell arrived at the base of Salamandra. This time, the guards of Salamandra were no longer the two people that Wu-Ming and Ren met last time. But even if the guards were changed, there was no one in Salamandra who did not recognize Wu-Ming. It could only be said that Wu-Ming's fame had spread. He had a strange and unknown method of breaking objects in half. With just a glance, he had intimidated all the members of Salamandra including Wu-Ming. Even White Yaksha treated him as an equal. The leader of Salamandra, Shadora, was also very respectful to him. Even Mandela of Salamandra chose to swallow his anger, after knowing that the person who destroyed the clock tower was a member of the same community. The two guards at the entrance of Salamandra swallowed a mouthful of saliva at the sight of this magnificent feat of farming. More importantly, Salamandra had offended this lord, and Lord Mandela of Salamandra had also clashed with this lord. This made the two guards' faces turn pale. They were not people like Shadora, Mandela, or even White Yaksha. If they accidentally provoked this master in front of them, they were afraid that they would be done for. Please inform them that No Name is here to discuss with Salamandra the matters that were not discussed yesterday. Wu-Ming said very politely to the two guards. One of the two from Salamandra nodded his head and turned to enter Salamandra's base. However, Wu-Ming did not know if he had seen wrongly, but he saw the guard in charge of reporting almost fall down at a corner inside Salamandra's base. From the looks of it, he seemed to be frightened. This was really baffling. However, there was something even more inexplicable. Wu-Ming noticed that the guard in front of him, who was still standing guard, was trembling and his face was pale. "Are you okay?" In the end, it was the kindest person, Ren, who asked with concern. "Oh, I'm fine, I'm fine." The guard was scared by Ren and stuttered as he answered. His eyes were vaguely looking at Wu-Ming as if he was afraid of provoking him. This made 16 knights, who caught the guard's small movements, interested. Looks like little brother left a deep impression on Salamandra yesterday. 16 knights teased Wu-Ming, but Wu-Ming also saw the guard's eyes looking at him erratically. This made Wu-Ming feel a little helpless. Was there a need to be so scared? Yesterday's matter was yesterday's matter. Yesterday's people were yesterday's people yesterday. It would not implicate anyone else. Let's just talk about it as it is. Furthermore, Wu-Ming wasn't someone who held grudges. He wouldn't vent his anger on the other members of Salamandra just because Salamandra didn't respect Wu-Ming in the beginning. After all, Wu-Ming was not a demon. However, in the eyes of Salamandra, Wu-Ming was a demon. Fortunately, in less than half a minute, Shadora and Mandela came out to greet him. This made the guard of Salamandra breathe a sigh of relief. "Welcome to Salamandra again, Leader Ren, Mr. Villo, Mr. 16 Knights." Shadora smiled sweetly. Wu-Ming listened to Shadora's words and was quite satisfied. This was because she first addressed Ren, who was the leader of the community, and not Wu-Ming, who was the most powerful. It could be seen that the other party, or Shadora, had begun to pay attention to No Name. No, in fact, Wu-Ming had already seen through it. Shadora, as a child with a pure heart, looked down on Salamandra for unilaterally breaking the contract with No Name quite disdainfully. However, because of Mandela's strong resistance, coupled with the fact that he had not contacted No Name for the past 3 years, it was not easy for Shadora to handle it. However, now that No Name had a strong person like Wu-Ming, Mandela's "we will not ally with the weak community" statement could no longer be used. This also made Shadora naturally begin to put No Name on the same level, which was why Shadora first addressed Ren, the leader of No Name, instead of Wu-Ming. Even if Mandela was a little unhappy, there was nothing he could do. He had also been frightened by Wu-Ming, and had been injured by No Name and the 3 unknown small fries. He had even felt the threat of death. It could be said that if it wasn't for White Yaksha's last shout that stopped the reversal of 16 Knights, Mandela believed that even if he didn't die, he would have lost a layer of skin. Therefore, Mandela had no way to deal with the issue of No Name's attitude and even contact. He could only let Shadora do as she saw fit. After all, this could also train Shadora's ability as the leader of the community. Moreover, she knew in her heart that it was enough to make Mandela feel at ease. Then, Ren responded to Shadora in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. "Yes, Leader Shadora. We're here to disturb you again." Shadora smiled and nodded, then extended her hand and gestured behind her. "This way, please." Then, Wu-Ming and the other two followed Shadora and Mandela. Under the gazes of the members of Salamandra, they came to the meeting room where No Name and Salamandra had discussed yesterday. When they opened the door, they saw White Yaksha, who had been waiting for a long time. "Oh, you're here. Hurry up. I'm already a little impatient from waiting." Although that was what she said, White Yiksha did not show any signs of impatience. However, they would not continue to wear down White Yiksha's patience just because she did not show any signs of impatience. Everyone quickly sat down in their seats from yesterday. However, compared to yesterday's lively atmosphere, today's meeting room was quite deserted. This was because whether it was Salamandra's side or No Name's side, the number of people had decreased by a lot compared to yesterday. Only Shadora and Mandela were on Salamandra's side today. The original Salamandra's higher-ups and Mandela's confidants were not present today. As for No Name, they had only sent out their leader Run Russell as well as the rookies Silent and 16 Knights. A total of 3 people. Black Rabbit, Jiu Yuasuka, Haruhibuyao and a series of girls did not come. Even Wu Ming's maid, Letitia, did not come because they had been chased away by Wu Ming to go shopping. White Yiksha was still alone and did not bring anyone else. Whether it was Salamandra or No Name, there were fewer people gathered here today. This gave people a feeling that they were not important. However, it was the exact opposite. The people gathered here today were all key figures in the various communities. Salamandra's leader, Shadora, the actual second-in-command, Mandela, No Name's leader, Ren Wuming, the strongest in No Name, and 16 Knights who gave Mandela the feeling of death yesterday and almost killed him. In other words, today's discussion was of the utmost importance. Then, let's begin the discussion about the Demon King's attack. As the host, White Yiksha was the first to speak. Chapter 639. White Yiksha's words were like a fuse that started the meeting. Ren looked at Wu Ming, who had no intention of speaking, and then looked at 16 Knights. Sensing Ren's gaze, 16 Knights laughed wantonly, then looked at Shadora and Mandela. There's nothing much to say. We'll help you defeat the Demon King, and the ownership of the Demon King will belong to No Name. Whether it was Shadora, Mandela, or White Yiksha, they were all a little confused by 16 Knights' straightforward words. After all, this was not the way to discuss things. However, White Yiksha could understand why 16 Knights said such words. After all, he was a problematic child. However, this was a little difficult for Shadora and Mandela to accept. Seeing Shadora and Mandela's hesitation, Wu Ming dropped a bombshell. Then let's be more specific. We, No Name, only want the ownership of the Demon King. We don't want anything else. Shadora and Mandela were shocked by Wu Ming's bombshell. Mr. Wu Ming? Even Ren was shocked. Not to mention other things, if they defeated the Demon King, their reputation would increase greatly, and everything under the Demon King's command would be paid. For a Demon King with the authority of the organizer, his possessions would naturally be extraordinary. At least they would not lose out. Therefore, even if it was for No Name, Ren wanted to fight for the benefits brought by the Demon King this time. Wu Ming naturally understood Ren's thoughts, but Wu Ming also had his own reasons. What does it matter? Although we, No Name, are in a state of having a lot of things to do because of the lack of manpower, what we need now is to increase our elite strength. Things like money and rare gifts can naturally be obtained with strength. What Wu Ming said wasn't wrong. If No Name defeated the Demon King in this Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, then their reputation would naturally spread. No Name did not lack funds at the moment, and in terms of gifts, with Wu Ming around, No Name actually did not lack any. After all, Wu Ming's advanced item creation wasn't just for show. Moreover, Wu Ming's Manchala Square Array had many other things as well. Although Wu Ming was currently in his spiritual body, the items inside the Manchala Square were all mana aggregates. However, Wu Ming could still take them out and use high-grade tools to create them. Although its performance couldn't be compared to the real thing, at least it wasn't a problem. Therefore, the most crucial point of No Name was its lack of combat power. After all, even though the box court world was nominally a world where negotiations were conducted through the gift competition, this world wasn't safe, especially when there was a cheater like the Demon King. No Name was unlike Salamandra, which had members of the Draconic bloodline and Flying Dragon troops. Therefore, they could only rely on the strength of individual elites. In No Name, other than Wu Ming, Letitia, 16 Knights in Reverse, Jiu Yuasuka, Haruai Hikari, and Black Rabbit, the others didn't have much fighting power. No, it should be that there were no older members left. And among them, only Wu Ming, Letitia, and 16 Knights in Reverse could be counted as fighting power. After all, Jiu Yuasuka hadn't found a suitable gift, so she could only rely on some weak gifts as consumables. As for Haruai Hikari, she didn't have many magical abilities when she first came to the box court world. She only had the abilities of most animals. As for Black Rabbit, because he was a box court noble, he was restricted by the box court world so he could be excluded. There were pros and cons to the identity of a Hakata noble. 3 years ago, Black Rabbit was not kidnapped by the Demon King because he had the identity of a Hakata noble. He had left No Name to become a referee in other places so he could be considered to have escaped. It was also because of his status as a box court noble that Black Rabbit couldn't freely participate in the gift competition and contribute to the community. In short, No Name was in urgent need of elite combat power, and the Demon King who had the authority of the organizer was the continuation of the current elite combat power. I agree with what Villo said. This time I think the same as him. Retroactive 16 Knights' tone was normal this time, but it still gave others the feeling of a problematic child. How about it, little guy? Retroactive 16 Knights looked at Ren and waited for his final decision. After all, Retroactive 16 Knights and Wuming weren't the leaders of No Name. Ren was the leader of No Name, so the decisions of the community should be made by Ren. Ren thought about it nervously and finally nodded. Then how about this? We, No Name, only want the ownership of the Demon King. We don't want anything else. What does Salamandra mean? Ren looked at Shadora and Mandela. Mandela and Shadora looked at each other. After a few seconds, Shadora looked at Ren and nodded. No problem, we, Salamandra, are not a community that relies on individuals. Therefore we can give you this Demon King that is attacking us. However, in return, all other benefits will belong to us, Salamandra. As compensation we, Salamandra, will help you promote No Name for free. Then after Ren nodded, Wuming suggested. Then let's make a contract. Wuming clapped his hands, and 2 parchments appeared above the heads of the 2 leaders, Shadora and Ren. The parchments fell and were held in Shadora and Ren's hands. This was something like a contract. Generally, cooperation between communities would have such a contract. After all, verbal agreements lacked binding force. However, the witness was Wuming, which was slightly disadvantageous to Salamandra. After all, how could the referee be a member of one side? The content of the contract was simply the requirements of both sides. There was nothing strange about it. Let us take a look, White Yaksha said as he waved at the parchments in Shadora and Ren's hands. Then the parchments in Shadora's hands flew out and into White Yaksha's hands. Immediately after, White Yaksha checked the 2 pieces of parchment and injected his power into them. In this case, the witnesses became Wuming and White Yaksha. Villo, you don't have any objections, right? White Yaksha looked at Wuming. Of course not. Wuming shrugged. White Yaksha was invited by Salamandra, so she was nominally on Salamandra's side. This way the 2 sides were balanced and there were witnesses on both sides. Wuming didn't care about this. After all, it was only fair this way, wasn't it? Okay, this way the alliance between Salamandra and No Name has been formed. Then, before the Demon King attacks, please enjoy this rare festival. White Yaksha closed his fan, representing the end of the meeting. Wuming and the other 2 also left Salamandra's base and began to enjoy it according to White Yaksha's words. Ironically, Salamandra and No Name were originally allies, but now such a drama had happened. It could only be said that the world was unpredictable. Chapter 640. At the entrance of the Salamandra base, Wu Ming, Ren He and 16 knights who had just come out stood there. Good. This terrible meeting is finally over. Let's enjoy the festival. However, 16 knights' words made the 2 guards and passers-by of Salamandra blush with shame. These embarrassed passers-by had some impression of 16 knights' reversal. They knew who had set up the clock tower yesterday. 16 knights' reversal could be considered to be a famous figure. Wu Ming hurriedly pulled reverse 16 knights and walked away. Behave yourself. The clock tower over there is still floating in the air. Wu Ming smiled helplessly. However, 16 knights was not ashamed of it. Instead, she was proud of it. Oh, it's my masterpiece. I have to admire it. Wu Ming could only smile helplessly. In any case, if 16th knights were to cause trouble again, Black Rabbit would be the first to be troubled. Then Wu Ming noticed that Ren was a little abnormal. Ren's face was a little gloomy. It seemed that he was in a bad mood. Are you thinking about the relationship with Salamandra? Wu Ming asked with concern. Ren heard Wu Ming's words and looked up at Wu Ming. Then he lowered his head and nodded. Although I know that it's not realistic to re-establish a relationship with Salamandra, it's still a pity. It was not that Ren was the kind of person who was cold to others. After all, Ren and Salamandra had some interactions before. If possible, Ren still hoped to reconcile. However, from the attitude that Shadora and Mandela did not mention restoring their alliance, they were probably still observing. The alliance written on Wuming's parchment was only until the Demon King was defeated. From the fact that they did not mention restoring their previous long-term alliance, they were indeed observing. Although White Yaksha and Wuming were the two powerhouses, one in the light and one in the dark, since they knew that White Yaksha was here and still dared to attack, it meant that they were not weak. At the very least, he had a way to deal with White Yaksha. And since there was a way to deal with White Yaksha, it was hard to guarantee that the other party didn't have a way to deal with unexpected enemies. Moreover, if the other party was an expert who could defeat White Yaksha in a head-on battle, then he naturally wouldn't be afraid of Wuming. However, the probability of this happening was quite small. If that was the case, or even worse, if they were all defeated by the Demon King, then Salamandra would naturally not have to worry about forming an alliance with no name. This was because they might not be able to survive by then, and Shadora and Mandela might even die in this Demon King's attack. Therefore, the matter of the alliance should be considered after the Demon King's attack. This was probably what Salamandra was thinking at the moment. Wuming felt that this was probably the result of Mandela and Shadora's discussion yesterday, and Mandela was the one who led it. Although they had only met twice, Wuming could tell that Shadora wasn't a scheming person, so all of this could only be Mandela's idea. As for Shadora, she probably compromised under her brother's multiple remonstrances. Because during the meeting just now, Wuming saw Shadora looking at No Name with an apologetic gaze more than once. However, Mandela really impressed Wuming. At this time he was still able to plan for a rainy day. It felt like he was already prepared. Wuming rubbed his chin and pondered. Mr. Villo? Ren looked at Wuming in deep thought and couldn't help but ask. Wuming came back to his senses and shook his head apologetically. It's okay. Don't worry so much. Since things have come to this, let's just enjoy the ceremony. Yes. After that, Wuming, 16 Knights and Ren separated. After all, he had to repair the clock tower that 16 Knights destroyed. Looking at the surrounding buildings and glass works of art, Wuming walked toward the clock tower while enjoying the artistic style of the northern district. Because there were still a few days before the fire dragon's birth ceremony, the outer door of 54,545 was crowded with many people who came to visit and prepare to participate in the gift competition. However, Wuming didn't use his ability. Instead, like an ordinary person, he walked along the road toward the clock tower bit by bit. Needless to say, this was a good experience for Wuming because he hadn't walked in such a large crowd for a long time. He slowly came to the location near the clock tower. Although the clock tower's wreckage floating in the air also became a scenery, it was not crowded here. After all, if such a thing happened in a world without any mystery, it would be quite interesting. However, if it happened in a world with a high degree of mystery, then everyone would only treat it as a special gift of power. Therefore it wasn't too crowded here. After Wuming cast Ignore Magic on himself, he flew into the air and came to the wreckage of the clock tower floating in the air. Wuming began to analyze the structure of this clock tower and allowed him to repair this clock tower. The clock tower in the box court world was just a clock tower made of ordinary stone bricks. After all, it was not a rare item, so Wuming didn't spend much effort. After about a few minutes, Wuming almost finished studying the structure of the clock tower. Then Wuming left the wreckage of the clock tower and flew higher. In just a few seconds, Wuming came to the highest point of the clock tower. There should have been a clock on the top of the clock tower, but now it was like a broken head. Only an uneven but quite neat break was left. It could only be said that 16 Knights' damage was really high. With a little force, the stone was directly smashed by 16 Knights like tofu. Although Wuming could also do it, 16 Knights was an ordinary person, at least he was indeed a human. Wuming became more and more interested in 16 Knights. The last fight hasn't ended yet. Why don't I fight him again when I have time? Wuming said casually. But let's finish the matter at hand first. Create green item, advanced item creation. With the recitation of the spell that he hadn't chanted for a long time, the clock tower was like a living creature. It directly grew a clock tower's roof directly from the break. Its structure and appearance were exactly the same as the original. Done crafting. Wuming clapped his hands. In an instant, the wreckage floating in the air that was controlled by Wuming's telekinesis seemed to be compressed by something and shrank visibly. When the wreckage was compressed to about 1 meter, Wuming snapped his fingers. Padash, a white flame ignited from the compressed pack. In just a few seconds, the flame extinguished and there was nothing in the air. At this time, because of the burning wreckage and the growth of the clock tower, many passers-by below looked at the clock tower that grew over here. Suddenly, Wu-Ming noticed a gaze looking at him. It was a petite girl wearing a spotted dress. Chapter 641. The girl had an exquisite face and was as cute as a doll. Her hairstyle was short, rose-colored hair, and two horn-like headpieces adorned the sides of her head. There was also cloth with spots on the hair ornaments, and two strands of hair fell naturally from the sides of her forehead, giving off a special sense of beauty. The girl's upper body was a black, sleeveless cheapao-style dress with white edges. She also wore black sleeve protectors on her arms like headpieces. The girl's sleeve protectors had black spots on them. The girl's lower body was a short skirt with black spots, as well as black knee socks and snow boots. Although this combination felt strange, it was particularly suitable for the girl. The young girl stood motionless in place and raised her head, staring at Wu-Ming with an expressionless face. Wu-Ming didn't find it strange that someone could see him. The magic trick Wu-Ming cast on him was just an ordinary magic trick to eliminate one's presence. It could be said that this was a magic trick that a slightly more serious magician would use. The magic trick to disperse idlers was the same as this magic trick. It was basically a necessary magic trick for magicians. After all, without this magic trick, it might be troublesome for magicians to do some secret things. However, since it was a necessary magic trick for magicians, it meant that the effect of this magic trick wouldn't be too strong. It would only be discovered by people who weren't very strong, and there wouldn't be a situation where a powerhouse like White Wuxia couldn't discover it. Therefore, Wu-Ming wasn't surprised that the girl in the spotted skirt could discover him in the crowd below. Maybe she's a powerhouse from a certain community, Wu-Ming said casually. The two of them had only met once, and Wu-Ming wouldn't strike up a conversation with her because of this. Just as Wu-Ming was about to leave, Wu-Ming suddenly heard a sentence. The power of the sun, annoying. Wu-Ming was taken aback, then looked at the girl in the spotted skirt again. The girl was still expressionless as she stared intently at Wu-Ming. Although he didn't know why, Wu-Ming was certain that the girl in the spotted skirt had said that sentence to him. And the power of the sun that the other party mentioned was most likely Wu-Ming's sun incarnation. The 12 clones that had become Wu-Ming's treasures were engraved in Wu-Ming's soul. However, the other party could see that Wu-Ming had the power of the sun from his soul. This made Wu-Ming curious. Could it be that this ordinary-looking little girl was an expert like White Wuxia? However, no matter what, the current situation meant that they were fated to meet. Therefore, Wu-Ming decided to interact more with him. However, just as Wu-Ming was about to fly down, the girl turned her head and left. Wu-Ming was quite annoyed by the way she kept him in suspense. However, since it was Wu-Ming's decision, Wu-Ming wouldn't give up. Wu-Ming followed the girl closely in the air until the girl walked into a small alley. Is she asking me to go in? Wu-Ming laughed. After all, the girl's actions were too similar to luring Wu-Ming into the alley. Wu-Ming landed unhurriedly. Just as he was about to walk into the alley, Wu-Ming noticed a shop that was open because of the ceremony. Then Wu-Ming, who suddenly had an idea, smiled and walked into the shop. A few minutes later, Wu-Ming walked out and entered the alley. The alley wasn't very complicated. It was just a one-way street with a few bends. After a few turns, Wu-Ming found the girl in the spotted skirt. At this moment, the girl was still expressionless, but Wu-Ming saw a trace of impatience on her face. However, because of the girl's cute face, this trace of impatience set off her delicate face. However, the girl still didn't complain, nor did she say anything to Wu-Ming. She just stood there silently. Because the girl led him here, Wu-Ming didn't need to speak first. Therefore, Wu-Ming didn't say anything. Just like the girl, he waited quietly. The two of them were in a stalemate and time passed little by little. A light breeze blew through the alley, and Wu-Ming and the girl's clothes and hair fluttered lightly. As if she had lost her patience, the girl spoke first. Whether it's your strength or your character, it makes me feel disgusted. The girl opened her cherry lips, and a voice that was as flat as death entered Wu-Ming's ears. This time, Wu-Ming was sure that the words that Wu-Ming said before he was about to leave in the air were from this girl. However, Wu-Ming naturally laughed it off as if he didn't care at all. I'm really sorry. After all, you were the one who lured me here. That's why I left the initiative in your hands. If I made you unhappy, then take this as an apology. After Wu-Ming finished speaking, he extended one hand to the side, and a golden ripple swallowed Wu-Ming's arm. That's the rare gift of space. Thinking of this, the girl in the spotted skirt began to become vigilant. Then she saw Wu-Ming take out from the strange golden ripple a cotton candy. Looking at the cotton candy, the girl in the spotted skirt was stunned. Because of the shock, the girl's face changed in an expression that she hadn't seen before, which made Wuming smile. Wuming saw that the girl in the spotted skirt looked like a loli, plus he saw a dessert shop, so he suddenly thought of something. After all, not every loli was an old monster like White Yiksha, right? Actually, it was Wuming's bad taste acting up again. After Wuming entered the dessert shop, he realized that cotton candy was the hottest product in the shop at the moment. Therefore, Wuming bought a lot of it and stored it in his dragon lair space. My space is very clean, you don't have to worry about dirtying it at all. Wuming walked to the girl in the spotted skirt who was stunned and stuffed the cotton candy into her hand. Moreover, because it was a relic, he didn't have to worry about dirtying it. The girl in the spotted skirt who wanted to refuse lost the opportunity to do so because she was stunned for a short while. The girl looked at the cotton candy in her hand, then looked at Wuming's gentle face that was like the sun, and there was a fluctuation in her eyes. The girl who had never felt such concern from a stranger had such a thought in her mind. It was as if the sun wasn't that annoying. Then the girl quickly shook her head. She still had business. How could she be influenced by the warmth of someone's concern? I don't need it. The girl stubbornly stuffed the cotton candy into Wuming's hand and returned it to Wuming. However, once Wuming had a bad taste, Wuming had turned into a problem child. In other words, he would do things like a problem child. Be good, Wuming said as he put the cotton candy in the girl's mouth. This made the girl in the spotted skirt widen her eyes in shock. Chapter 642. The girl in the spotted skirt was surprised by two things. One was Wuming's sudden attack, and the other was the sweetness of the cotton candy. The girl who had never eaten such a dessert subconsciously took 2 bites of the cotton candy and began to chew. How is it the cotton candy is not bad, right? Wuming asked with a smile as he fed the girl. It feels not bad. The girl replied subconsciously as she enjoyed Wuming's service. However, after she finished speaking, the girl seemed to have realized something and quickly jumped back, away from Wuming. Then she put on a vigilant look. Wuming didn't mind. Then Wuming stood up. It's about time to get down to business, unknown lady. Wuming was still smiling, but his tone was serious. Then Wuming looked in a certain direction. Also, are the 2 people over there your subordinates? You can let them come out now. This made the girl slightly moved, but the person hiding somewhere still didn't move. As a qualified subordinate, without the master's order, they wouldn't act on their own. Then what they needed was only the girl's consent. You 2 come out. Just as the girl finished speaking, 2 figures jumped to the side of the girl. It was a man and a woman. The man was in a gray military uniform with pointy ears like an elf. His long and sharp hair was combed back, and with his sharp face, he looked like a soldier. The woman was wearing a rather revealing white swimsuit that could only cover her 3 points. Her arms and legs were covered with sleeves, and behind her was a wide white cloak. On her head was a blue and white pointed hat that looked like a clown's hat. Not sure if it was a coincidence, but her ears were also pointy. Compared to the man in the military uniform, she looked more like an elf. Since these 2 people appeared, they vaguely stood in front of the girl in the spotted skirt, like loyal dogs protecting their master. It seems that you are a community and you are an important part of the community. Wuming looked at the girl in the spotted skirt. Then Wuming smiled. Well then, may I know your name, miss? First, my name is Villo, they answered. The male and female guards did not open their mouths. They did not dare to open their mouths. Just by standing there, Wuming gave them a lot of pressure. If their master wasn't here, they would have run away from this dangerous guy. Wuming? My name is Pester. Also, can you stop targeting my subordinates? The girl named Pester said. I'm sorry, I can't help but pay attention to the people hiding in the dark. After Wuming said that, the pressure on Pest's bodyguards disappeared. Wuming had indeed been using his mental strength to suppress them, but it was not because of Wuming's involuntary attention. Wuming used his mental strength to suppress them because he wanted to gain the upper hand by making the first move. After all, they lured Wuming here with a purpose. Wuming naturally had to fight for the initiative, right? Pester continued to order her 2 subordinates. Both of you stand down. Master. Pester's 2 subordinates were shocked, but they retreated behind Pester in the end. It was not that they were not confident, but they really could not do anything to Wuming. It could be said that even with their master Pester, the 3 of them would not be able to cause any harm to Wuming. Very good. Next question, why did you ask me to come here? Wuming nodded in satisfaction. This was the result of having strength. However, to Wu Ming's surprise, Pester actually answered this question. Just to see you, that's all, Pest answered Wu Ming in a very private manner. Moreover, this answer didn't seem to be nonsense. See me? Wu Ming was puzzled. To be honest, whether it was in the east or the north, Wu Ming was not very famous. After all, he had just arrived in this world not long ago. However, there were many people who had only heard of his name and knew of his existence. After all, what Wu Ming did in the north yesterday had basically spread. With his strange ability, he controlled the falling clock tower and fought with Salamandra's troops at the entrance. With just a glance, he took down all the people who besieged him. White Yiksha even treated him as an equal. Just these 3 incidents were enough to make Wu Ming famous. Could it be that these 3 people were a community that participated in the fire dragon's birth ceremony and wanted to see him because they heard about these incidents? Wu Ming guessed. Of course, the probability of this guess being correct in Wu Ming's opinion was almost impossible. After all, there was no lack of strong people in this world. Apart from hardcore fans, no one would lead their subordinates to lead their idols to an alley. At this moment, Pester's next words completely eliminated this guess. But you're more annoying than I thought. Pester looked at Wu Ming with disgust. However, this made Wu Ming feel that this was something new. Wu Ming had never been spoken to like this before. Then, someone must have told Pester about him. That's why they came here with a purpose. Wu Ming thought. Could it be those people who told Pester? Wu Ming suddenly thought of the group of people who tried to buy Letitia. Those people were definitely not easy to deal with. If it wasn't for Maxwell's ability that caught Wu Ming off guard, Wu Ming would definitely have kept those people alive. Perhaps, Pester was invited by those people to deal with Wu Ming. However, Wu Ming was once again slapped in the face. Because I heard that you and White Yiksha seem to be friends of the same generation, I came to take a look, Pester said calmly. Although it's not as serious as White Yiksha, you still annoy me. Wu Ming could only shrug helplessly. It seemed that Pester had some grudges with Sun, however, since Pester wasn't looking for trouble, Wu Ming didn't need to stay any longer. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first, Wu Ming said as he used his telekinesis to send the cotton candy that Pester had eaten to Pester. It's fate that we met. Take it as a greeting gift from me. Pester struggled for a moment before taking it. After all, he couldn't go against food, right? The next moment, Wu Ming's figure was swallowed by the teleportation door. Only Pester and the other 2 were left in the alley. Pester gently took a bite of the cotton candy and fell into deep thought. At this moment, Pester's female subordinate spoke. Master, should we continue to attack during the ceremony? Chapter 643. It could only be said that this subordinate of Pest's was rather careless. She was not afraid that Wu Ming would be eavesdropping instead of leaving. However, she did not mention the specifics. Thus, even if someone were to eavesdrop on them, it would be fine. Why don't we continue? Pest asked instead of answering. But Master, it's not that we don't have confidence. It's just that if he were to participate in the fire dragon's birth ceremony, we wouldn't have the certainty of victory, the scantily clad woman whispered into Pest's ear. Lotting is right. My lord, if he makes a move, then not to mention Lotting and I, even you won't be able to fight against him. The man in military uniform frowned as he stood beside the 2 of them. Lotting will, do the 2 of you think that we would not be able to take revenge on him, someone who also possesses the sun? Pest asked with an indifferent tone. Once Pest said those words, her 2 subordinates by the name of Lotting and Will were greatly alarmed. They immediately looked to their surroundings, afraid that they would be overheard by others. Don't worry, he has already left, Pest, who had long since confirmed that Wu Ming had left, comforted the 2 of them. Although Pest was not as powerful as Wu Ming, she was still capable of checking whether Wu Ming had left or not. Really, Master, please don't scare us. If he were to hear us, it would be bad. Lotting patted her chest and took a deep breath. After the man in military uniform by the name of Will heard Pest's words, his tightly furrowed brows also relaxed. Then he sighed in worry. After all, he is not a pure son. Even if the ritual succeeds, I reckon that it will only weaken a portion of his power. He is not like White Yiksha, who can completely control his movements. If Wu Ming were here, he would most definitely be astonished by those words. White Yiksha was an existence ranked in the top 10 of the boxers. Yet these people actually said that they could control White Yiksha's movements. If Wu Ming were really here, then he was certain that the enemy that was about to attack them was most likely Pest. Unfortunately, Wu Ming really left. That's enough. At that time, the death god Black Death Spot will eliminate him, Pest said expressionlessly. However, there was a trace of viciousness on her face. Don't worry. Hearing Pest's words, Lading and Will were stunned. Then they looked to each other. Then the two of them kneeled on one knee before Pest. Yes, my lord. However, there was still worry in their eyes. However, since Pest had said it like this, the two of them would not refute her. After all, they were not summoned for any purpose. Their only purpose was to serve their master, the young woman before them, Pest. Pest nodded expressionlessly. She turned around and began to walk out of the alley. At any rate, there are still a few more days before the fire dragon's birth ceremony. You two don't need to follow me. Just go take a stroll, Pest said without even turning her head. Amen? This caused Lading and Will to look at Pest in disbelief. Even though the two of them had not known Pest for a long time, Pest was not someone who would waste her time on strolling the streets, much less asking the two of them to stroll the streets. After all, the fire dragon's birth ceremony is a rare ceremony. The two of you have never experienced such a ceremony before. Just go ahead and take a stroll. Pest seemed to be embarrassed. Her face turned slightly red. Then she turned her head away. But, my lord, if there is no one by your side, we will not be at ease, Will said hesitantly. Pest then interrupted him. Do you think I need someone to protect me? Pest turned around and took a silent glance at Will. My apologies, my lord. Will immediately kneeled on one knee and apologized. As they were colleagues, Lading was quite good at taking care of others. She immediately grabbed Will's arm and walked toward the back entrance of the alley. That's enough, my lord. Please don't be angry. I will bring Will and take a stroll. You shouldn't stay idle either. Properly enjoy the last bit of joy brought by this ceremony. After all, the 54545 outer gate would most likely turn into a black hell. Hey, woman, don't pull me. Look at how I'm acting in front of my lord. I can walk on my own. Yes. Lord Will, please go ahead. Then, amidst Will's complaints and Lading's playful laughter, the two of them left the alley. Sensing that Lading and Will had left, a trace of hesitation and confusion appeared on Pest's face. She looked at the cotton candy in her hand and began to eat it in small bites. Then, as if she instantly reacted to something, the hesitation and confusion on Pest's face turned into determination. A cluster of terrifying black gas appeared on Pest's hand. In less than a second, the black gas disappeared. As for the cotton candy in Pest's hand, it disappeared together with the black gas. Then Pest turned around. A black whirlwind enveloped her. Her petite figure instantly disappeared. Only a single sentence was left behind in the empty alley. Revenge. Wuming, who had left the alley a long time ago, decided to take a stroll around the 54545 outer gate. When the time was almost up, he would go look for Ren and the others. Although Wuming had strolled around on his way to the clock tower, he had only strolled around the street that led to the clock tower. He did not visit the entire street. Thus, there were many places that Wuming had yet to visit. As Wuming admired the unique works of art in his surroundings and sensed the joyous atmosphere that grew closer to the fire dragon's birth ceremony, he could not help but be infected by the atmosphere. I must say, the box court world is truly a mystical place. Wuming sighed in admiration as he looked at the people of various races around him and the works of art that were filled with the style of the North District. Then Wuming walked up to the nearest glass painting and stopped to look at it. Is this the Pied Piper of Hamel? Wuming asked when he saw the image on the glass painting before him. The Pied Piper of Hamel was a fairy tale. It was about a small town called Hamel that was infested with rats. The villagers hired a rat catcher to catch the rats. The stained glass in front of him was a scene from the fairy tale The Pied Piper of Hamel. The rat catcher played his flute and lured the teachers to drown in the Wuxia River. That was the end of the fairy tale. However, according to Wuming's understanding, there was a continuation to this fairy tale. The villagers refused to pay the rat catcher because they had breached the contract. The rat catcher played his flute on a rainy night and took away 130 children born in Hamel. No one knew if they were dead or alive. Due to the adaptation of the fairy tale, the bad parts were removed. Hence, the fairy tales that ordinary people read had happy endings. However, in the box court world, it was impossible for these stories to be hidden. They should have been restored. After all, there was no need to take care of children in the box court world. After all, this was the box court world. However, is the style of the North District that strange? Introducing dark fairy tales? Wuming pondered as he left. Chapter 644. Wu-Ming gave up on thinking about it when he noticed that there were many fairy tale glass paintings around him. After all, it might be her style. After walking around for a while, Wu-Ming arrived near the exhibition hall that was carved out of the boundary wall. After admiring the exhibition hall that was built on the boundary wall, Wu-Ming walked inside. Let's go in and take a look. First of all, the exhibition hall was free to view. However, as soon as Wu-Ming walked to the entrance of the exhibition hall, many people suddenly ran out from inside. They were all visitors who were in the exhibition hall. Dodging the visitors who were running around, Wu-Ming frowned and looked into the exhibition hall. Wu-Ming felt Letitia's aura in the exhibition hall. She was using the power that she obtained as Wu-Ming's dependent. Could it be that the Demon King is here now? Wu-Ming was quite puzzled. However, the most important thing now was to go in and take a look. If it was really the Demon King, Wu-Ming was prepared to kill him directly and get rid of him once and for all. Now, the visitors in the exhibition hall had basically all run away, which saved Wu-Ming the trouble. After entering the exhibition hall, Wu-Ming didn't find anything wrong. Then Wu-Ming ran in the direction of Letitia. Because the exhibition hall was a circular passage and the distance between Letitia and Wu-Ming was not far, it only took a few seconds for Wu-Ming to reach Letitia. However, Letitia wasn't alone. There was another person sitting beside Letitia. It was Jiao Feiniao, whose clothes were slightly damaged and mixed with some bloodstains. Letitia, Feiniao, are you okay? Wu-Ming said as he came in front of Jiao Feiniao and cast a healing loon magic on her. I'm fine. These bloodstains aren't mine. Don't worry. Jiao Feiniao reached out a hand to Wu-Ming and signaled Wu-Ming to pull her up. After gently pulling Jiao Feiniao up, Wu-Ming realized that Jiao Feiniao's other hand was gently holding, or rather gently hugging, a yellow fairy the size of a palm. Without asking about the fairy's origin, Wu-Ming first asked why the two of them were there. Why are the two of you here? Where are Black Rabbit, Lily and Haruai? Even though he was asking, Wu-Ming didn't stop healing Jiao Feiniao. Although the blood on Jiao Feiniao's body wasn't hers, there were still some abrasions on her body. Moreover, the bloodstains on Jiao Feiniao's clothes were stains and her dress was damaged. Master, I chased after Jiao Feiniao. Black Rabbit and the others should still be waiting for us on the street. Letitia pointed at the other side of the road. The exhibition hall had a few entrances and exits. Wu-Ming came from one of the entrances and Letitia was pointing at the other one. Did you guys encounter rats? Wu-Ming finished healing Jiao Feiniao's wounds and began to clean up the bloodstains and repair the dress. Villo, how did you know? Jiao Feiniao hugged the fairy in her arms and looked at Wu-Ming in surprise. It's too obvious. Wu-Ming pointed at the damaged parts of Jiao Feiniao's dress. The damaged areas looked like they were bitten by some rodent. The first thing that came to mind was probably a rat. I'm just guessing, but looking at the two of you, it should be correct. Wu-Ming used magic to repair the damaged parts of the dress and continued to ask. Then Jiao Feiniao, why did you come here? In an instant, Jiao Feiniao confidently extended the fairy in her arms. Of course it's for this child. Wu-Ming looked at the fairy carefully. The fairy was so scared that it quickly ran towards Jiao Feiniao. After hugging the fairy, Jiao Feiniao explained. When Jiao Yuasuke was shopping with other girls, Jiao Yuasuke accidentally saw this little elf. After hearing that the fairy was a group fairy and that it could be dangerous alone, Jiao Feiniao wanted to protect it for the time being. In the end, because the fairy was too timid, it was scared away. Jiao Feiniao hurriedly told Black Rabbit and the others and chased after it. Because little fairy ran inside, Jiao Yuanfei also followed in. In the end, the fairy was almost bitten to death by a few rats. At that moment, Jiao Feiniao appeared and saved it. However, it attracted a large number of rats. Because in the small space of the exhibition hall, Jiao Feiniao did not dare to use any harmful gifts in fear of destroying the exhibition hall. It had to be said that Jiao Feiniao did not use her potential as a problem child and destroyed the exhibition hall. However, the price was that Jiao Feiniao had to pay for it. Jiao Feiniao wanted to use her power to control the rats. However, she realized that the rats could not be controlled. It was as if they were controlled by someone else. In the end, Jiao Feiniao used the Sword of Grace and ran away with the fairy while attacking. The damage to her dress was caused by the rats. The blood on her body was caused by the rats. Then, as the number of rats increased, Letitia appeared and forced the rats to retreat. Miraculously, the rats would turn into ashes when they died. That was why there were no rat corpses. However, the blood of the rats could be left on the clothes. Letitia was worried, so she told Black Rabbit and the others and followed them. After that, Wu-Ming also rushed over. Rats. After cleaning the blood on Jiao Feiniao and repairing the damage on the clothes, Wu Ming stopped his magic and started to think. Is there any other information? After all, Wu Ming valued information the most. Because with information all the mysteries would be solved. Jiao Feiniao and Letitia started to think. Suddenly Jiao Feiniao remembered something. Speaking of which, I think I heard the sound of a flute. Flute? Wu Ming was stunned. It was not that Wu Ming had any special understanding of the flute. It was just that he had just replayed the story of how the flute controlled the rats. Hamel's Pied Piper. Jiao Feiniao also said that she heard the sound of the flute. Moreover, the rats seemed to be controlled. This made Wu Ming think in this direction. This is interesting. Wu Ming smiled as he thought of the girl in the spotted skirt he had met before. Letitia, Feiniao, you might have met the subordinates of the Demon King who are preparing to attack the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. The subordinates of the Demon King? Jiao Feiniao and Letitia were shocked. Why do you say that, Master? Letitia asked in confusion. Because I just met the Demon King. Wu Ming smiled confidently. Chapter 645. After obtaining some information about the Demon King, as the leader of the community, Rin's first thought was to discuss with Salamandra and Byakuya. Wu Ming, 16 knights, and the others also agreed, so everyone returned to Salamandra's base. In Salamandra's conference room. Because of the information about the Demon King, Sandora urgently summoned Mandela and some of Salamandra's higher-ups to the conference room. Wu Ming, Letitia, 16 knights, Joasuke, Hiroyuki, Rin, Lily, Byakuya, Sandora, Mandela, and several of Salamandra's higher-ups gathered together. Because they had become allies, they didn't sit down like before, but sat on the rectangular conference table according to the order of position and strength. Sandora, as the host, naturally sat at the head of the table. On her left was Salamandra's group, and on her right was No Name's group. Immediately afterward, Sandora, the host, took the lead to speak. Villo, San said that he knows the details of the Demon King. Is this information accurate? Sandora said, looking at Wu Ming, who was sitting on the second seat on her right. By the way, sitting on the first seat on Sandora's right was Ren, who was the leader of Salamandra's ally No Name. I'm not 100% sure, but the accuracy is very high. Wu Ming cast an imperceptible glance at Mandela. Then he told Mandela about his encounter with the girl named Pest, as well as how Long Flying Bird and Letitia were attacked by the rats controlled by the flute sound. You mean the Demon King this time is related to Hamel's Piper? Byakuya, who was sitting on the first seat on Sandora's left, said. By the way, as Salamandra's second-in-command, Mandela's seat was the second seat on Sandora's left. Rin could sit on the first seat on the right because he was the leader of the alliance, and Byakuya was nominally a member of Salamandra. Whether it was Byakuya's reputation or strength, there was no problem for him to sit on the first seat. Hamel's Pied Piper? Feiniao, Yao and the others were confused. They did not know this name very well. It's a story from a fairy tale. The villagers of a village called Hamel invited a rat catcher to catch rats, 16 knights explained to Shadora in a friendly manner. However, in the box court world, this story should be passed down in the form of a dark fairy tale. So you're saying that the ending wasn't good? Jiao Yuan Feiniao asked. Due to the villagers' breach of contract, the rat catcher who used the flute to control the rats controlled 130 children born in Hamel on a rainy night and led them into the forest in the north. After that, both the rat catcher and the children disappeared. Ren answered. The box court world was very particular about inheritance. Therefore, as the leader of No Name, Ren would often stay in the underground library of No Name to read and study. Especially after Wu Ming and the other three came to No Name, Ren worked even harder. As far as the sound of the flute and the controlled rats are concerned, this fits the story of Hamel's Pied Piper. Sandora nodded. Then why would it be related to the girl named Pest? Harahib Yayoi raised his hand and asked. Because in the story of Hamel's Pied Piper, the children who disappeared were also said to have died from the Black Death. Wu Ming then looked at Byakuya. Byakuya, if the enemy is really like what I think, I'm afraid you'll be in trouble this time. Byakuya also sighed. Maybe it's really possible. Wu Ming and Byakuya's words confused most of the people present. What does this have to do with Lord Byakuya? Black Rabbit looked at Byakuya and Wu Ming in confusion. Pest has the meaning of plague. As for the Black Death, it is also the plague. The reason why the Black Death was born was because the sun had entered the Little Ice Age, causing its activity to decrease. With Wuming's explanation, those who did not understand understood. And Byakuya is the sun's star spirit. It's inevitable that the enemy will have a way to restrain Byakuya. If the attacking Devil King was related to the Black Death, then the mystery of why the enemy would attack the Fire Dragon's birth festival despite knowing that Byakuya would be present was solved. What? Then isn't everyone in danger? Black Rabbit was shocked. Don't worry, Black Rabbit. The Villo is still here. Byakuya comforted Black Rabbit. Wasn't it because they were worried that something would happen to Byakuya that they invited No Name over? If I'm not mistaken, the pest I encountered is the enemy. To be honest, I don't think she can defeat Byakuya in a head-on battle. Although Wuming could not determine how many digits Pest had because she did not use her power, judging from the fact that she only had 6 digits under her command, Pest's power was probably not much higher. Even if she really had a way to raise her power to Byakuya's level, Wuming was not afraid. He lacked everything except for a trump card. Especially after knowing about the other party's inheritance, Wuming was even less afraid of her. One of Wuming's 12 incarnations targeted his inheritance. That was the incarnation of a warrior. This incarnation was mainly evolved from Welaslana's warrior with a golden sword. Originally, this incarnation had the ability to cut off the other party's divinity by reciting their inheritance. However, after fusing with Carmel's divine power and Wuming's own power, the incarnation still retained its golden sword form and became capable of cutting off the other party's inheritance. It was no longer limited to the divinity. As for the Black Death's inheritance, Wuming, who had read many books in No Name's underground library, expressed that he had no problem with it at all. If one came, he would kill one. If 2 came, he would kill 2. However, this was only the simplest trump card in Wuming's hands. Wuming still had many other ways to deal with Pest. Even if she has a way to deal with Byakuya, Pest will not be able to fight against me. This is not arrogance. It's the truth. Wuming's words gave people a sense of relief. Naturally, No Name's side would not doubt Wuming. Instead, they completely believed in him and their companions. On the other hand, Salamandra's side began to doubt him. Although you are indeed very powerful, you should not be so arrogant before you know the identity of your enemy. Mandela opened his mouth to refute Wuming's words. Everyone's gazes gathered on Mandela. Chapter 646. Wuming understood that Mandela was not trying to pick a fight. What he said was reasonable. It's not strange for someone to have inherited the Black Death. After all, there are many communities with negative inheritances in the Northern District. After all, regardless of whether the inheritances were good or bad, the box court world still had its value. When the people of the box court world faced communities with negative inheritances, as long as they did not openly stir up trouble, no one would come out and shout stupid things like defeating evil. Take Guard, who had turned into human excrement, as an example. His community, Forsgaro, originated from a community alliance called Beast of 666. The leader of this alliance was a demon king with 3 digits. It must be said that as long as one possessed sufficient strength and did not openly stir up trouble, one would be considered a good person. Due to the fact that Guard's actions were simply too outrageous and his strength was not sufficient to attract the attention of the demon king with 3 digits, the Forsgaro was disbanded and Guard was stripped of his spirit level to become someone else's food. The Beast of 666 did not say anything about it. It could only be said that he was discovered after doing something so serious. There could only be 4 words to describe it. Even death could not wipe out his crimes. The reason why a rat attacked Miss Jiyuan can only be said to be because of this little fellow. As Mandela spoke, he pointed to the little yellow spirit standing on Jiyuan Fei's shoulder. This greatly alarmed the little spirit. It immediately shrank back into Jiyuan Fei's hair. Jiyuan Fei used her hand to comfort the little spirit. Then she glared at Mandela in dissatisfaction. Based on Lord Villo's words, it seems that a rat attacked this little spirit. Miss Jiyuan saved the life of this little spirit and ended up being attacked by the rat. However, Mandela ignored Jiyuan Fei's words and continued with his words. You mean to say that it is impossible to prove that the enemy is the pest I spoke of? Wuming asked indifferently. I have no intention of offending you. I am merely stating the facts. Mandela was not very respectful. However, he still replied to Wuming courteously. Ever since Mandela saw how powerful Wuming was, whether it was from the bottom of his heart or not, Mandela had started to respect Wuming a little. At the very least, he placed Wuming on the same level as White Yaksha. but Mandela's words make sense. Wu-ming admitted Mandela generously. Everyone present, including Mandela, was taken aback by this development. After all, they did not expect Wu-ming to so generously agree with Mandela's words. After all, as I said before, I can't guarantee its accuracy. Wu-ming shrugged. However, although Mandela's words make sense, I can't say that my judgment is completely wrong. Wu-ming looked at Mandela with a meaningful smile. Of course. In the face of Wu-ming's meaningful smile, Mandela nodded calmly. If that's the case, then Salamandra should prepare a response. Mandela looked at Wu-ming, who had a strange smile on his face, and nodded his head in agreement. Then the meeting ended. Because it was almost time, No Name used Wu-ming's portal to return to the Eastern District. Mr. Villo, did something happen between you and Mandela? As soon as they came out of the portal, Black Rabbit asked Wu-ming. Whether it was Shadora and the others from Salamandra, or Ren and the others from No Name, they all saw that something was not right between Wu-ming and Mandela. Especially when Wu-ming looked at Mandela with a smile, even Lily, who did not have much strength, felt that something was wrong, let alone the others. Nothing, I just told Mandela that I only knew about his plan. Wu-ming came to a sofa and sat down. Wu-ming's portal opened in a large room similar to a living room, so there was a sofa for sitting. This was an ordinary living room, but because no one would come here, it became the room where Jiuyuki, Haruai Biao, and the others had tea parties. What do you mean? Jiuyuki asked. As she said that, Jiuyuki also found a sofa and sat down. The others did the same. However, Wu-ming was not in a hurry to explain. Instead, he looked at 16 Knights, who was as smart as Wu-ming. 16 Knights shouldn't have noticed. 16 Knights, who was also sitting on a sofa, stretched out her hands and waved helplessly. Although I could guess a little from what you said in Salamandra, I didn't have enough information. After that, 16 Knights leaned back on the sofa and held the back of her head with both hands, waiting for Wu-ming's answer. Although he liked to be a decryptor, he could accept being a spectator. In short, he was casual. It's normal that you can't guess because I didn't say one thing just now. Wu-ming looked at everyone. You didn't say one thing? Everyone was puzzled. But is it really okay to not tell Salamandra and White Yiksha the information? Ren asked worriedly. Don't worry, Ren, I'm thinking about Mandela. Wu-ming's face showed the same smile as when he looked at Mandela. This caused everyone to be completely confused. What was going on? I saw a lot of glass paintings of the Pied Piper of Hamelin on the street. Glass paintings of the Pied Piper of Hamelin? Everyone present could not understand what Wu-ming was talking about. That is to say, if there is someone who can understand, 16 Knights will understand Wu-ming. Aha, so that's how it is. 16 Knights suddenly laughed. Everyone looked at 16 Knights in confusion and helplessness. Speaking of which, can't you guys make things clear? Don't keep me in suspense. Then let me analyze it from the beginning, everyone, Wu-ming said. Salamandra is at a low point and is being targeted by the other class leaders in the North District. The reason is because one of the class leaders in the North District, Shadora, is too young and inexperienced. Wu-ming looked at 16 Knights and gestured for her to continue. Then Shadora needs a chance to make a name for herself, such as defeating the Demon King or something. Defeat the Demon King? Everyone was shocked. However, what surprised everyone was not the fact that the Demon King had been defeated, but the result of the series of intelligence and analysis that they had obtained. Immediately after, Black Rabbit spoke in disbelief. Mr. Villo, Mr. 16 Knights, do you mean that Salamandra and the others summoned the Demon King? Chapter 647. Black Rabbit's voice was trembling. She couldn't imagine that someone would take the initiative to summon a Demon King. As a member of the community that had experienced the Demon King's attack, she understood the terror of a Demon King better than anyone else. If Salamandra's method succeeded, then it would be fine. But if it failed, then other than eternal damnation, Black Rabbit couldn't think of any other adjectives to describe it. Salamandra is indeed a little crazy, but they aren't stupid enough to provoke those old and powerful Demon Kings. Wu-ming thought. If I'm not wrong, the Demon King that Salamandra summoned this time, in the ranks of the Demon Kings, must be a new Demon King that isn't too strong. However, Black Rabbit held a different view. Even if it's a new Demon King, it's still a Demon King. They're playing with fire? Black Rabbit stood up excitedly. It's not unimaginable to take the risk. Jiu Fei Niao said lightly. After all, this is a great opportunity to increase Shadora's reputation and trust. Uruai Hibe added. Salamandra is at its lowest point. If Salamandra takes the risk and allows Shadora and White Yaksha to work together to defeat the Demon King, then not only will Shadora be able to inherit the position of the ruler of the Northern District, but at the same time, they will also be able to obtain the Demon King to join them. This is a sure-win deal. If it were me, I would do it too. 16 Knights Reversal laughed heartlessly. Although that's the case, but if the other party has a way to deal with White Yaksha-sama, then it's very likely that both White Yaksha-sama and Salamandra will fall into the other party's hands. Black Rabbit looked at 16 Knights, Fei Yao and Yao worriedly. Because if the community or individual that was forced to participate in the Demon King's gift competition failed, then the community or individual would belong to the Demon King. Just like No Name, 3 years ago, they were defeated in the Demon King's gift competition. Almost all of their members were forced to leave No Name. They were either bought, sold, or exiled. However, such a Demon King could still be considered kind. That was because compared to exiling and selling their spoils of war, many eccentric or irascible Demon Kings wouldn't do such a thing. Their original goal was not to keep these losers for fun, but to amuse themselves in the gift contest. To put it simply, these Demon Kings would directly kill all the people trapped in their own gift contest and take pleasure in it. No matter which option it was, it could be said that it was not good or it could be said that it was terrible. Don't worry, Black Rabbit. Even if something happens to White Yaksha, I'm still here. Nothing will happen. Wuming comforted Black Rabbit. Besides, this is just my guess. What if I'm wrong? Wuming joked. However, no one took Wuming's words seriously. What a joke. Wuming's previous deduction was perfect to the extreme. If it was still false, then nothing would be true. Letitia didn't care about Wuming's joke. Instead, she asked about something else. Then, Master, you didn't mention this key point. I'm afraid it's not for Mandela's sake. Although Letitia hadn't been in contact with her master for long, she already knew him very well. In short, no matter what, her master would never be so kind. Letitia knows me best. Wuming smiled, then Wuming looked at everyone. The reason why I didn't mention this key point is actually for No Name. For No Name? Renha Black Rabbit subconsciously repeated Wuming's words. Looking at the two puzzled people, 16 Knights Reversal laughed wantonly. After all, our No Name also needs publicity, young Master Little Munchkin, perverted rabbit. Renha Black Rabbit came to a realization. Black Rabbit even forgot how 16 Knights Reversal addressed him. Why didn't Wuming say this key point in front of Shadora, Mandela, and White Yaksha? Because once he said it, not to mention Shadora and Mandela, White Yaksha alone would be able to deduce the truth of the matter with so much information. If Wuming said it, then the Demon King's monster attack would likely end tonight. First of all, since Salamandra had a way to lure the Demon King, then there must be a way to get rid of it. If White Yaksha knew that Salamandra had lured the Demon King, then she would definitely strictly ask Salamandra to destroy the item that lured the Demon King here. However, even if it was destroyed, the Demon King might not choose to retreat. If you were called here for no reason and then chased away by the person who called you here for no reason, anyone would be angry, let alone the Demon King. Moreover, if the Demon King was determined to attack, no one would be able to stop him. It was precisely because Mandela knew that even if he destroyed the item that lured the Demon King here, he would not be able to make the Demon King retreat. Therefore, he diverted everyone's attention and deliberately said that Wuming's words were not necessarily true, to make everyone lower their guard. After all, with so much information, if White Yaksha still could not find the target, then she should find a tofu and smash her head against it. At that time, it would be inevitable that the other party would lose to White Yaksha. Wuming did not think that the other party's method that worked on White Yaksha could be used instantly. At the very least, they would have to prepare a little. Therefore, if Pest and the others were attacked by White Yaksha, then it would basically be the end. However, Mandela would not allow it. White Yaksha could defeat the Demon King, but she could not defeat him before the ceremony began, nor could she defeat him alone. She had to be with Shadora. This was because only then could Shadora's reputation spread and allow her to inherit the position of the ruler of the North District. Wuming shook his head as Shadora's pure and innocent face flashed across his mind. I'm guessing that Shadora doesn't know about this yet. Mandela was the one who planned all of this. No one objected to Wuming's words. Although they had only interacted for a few days, whether it was Ren Black Rabbit and the others who had interacted with Shadora before, or 16 Knights Flying Bird, and the others who had not interacted with Shadora before, they could all feel the kindness in Shadora's heart. It was impossible for Shadora to agree to let the Demon King attack the ceremony and consolidate her position by defeating the Demon King. Perhaps sometimes people's eyes would be deceived by others' deliberate pretense, but Shadora's kindness from the bottom of her heart could provide favorable evidence that she was unaware of Salamandra's plan this time. Seeing that everyone had calmed down, Wu Ming made a suggestion. "I say, do you want to walk around the outer gate of the 54545 tonight?" Chapter 648. After dinner, the group of No Name once again went through Wu Ming's portal and arrived at the North District's 54545 outer gate. Because the Fire Dragon birth ceremony was going to be held in 2 days, the night here was quite lively. The streets were filled with colorful lights, and the flow of people wasn't any worse than during the day. The gift competition that would only be held at night began in various shops, and the aroma of delicious food filled the entire outer gate of 54,545. Although the Fire Dragon birth ceremony hasn't started yet, it's already so lively. 16 Knights said thoughtfully. Although the Fire Dragon birth ceremony hadn't started yet, it was only a few days away. The nights before a large festival were usually very lively, so it wasn't wrong to be so lively a few days before the Fire Dragon birth ceremony. However, since Wu Ming and the others didn't look for a hotel, they chose to return to No Name through Wu Ming's portal, so No Name didn't see such a lively night scene at night. Seeing that everyone was eager to try, Wu Ming opened his mouth. "Let's walk around and gather here in 2 hours. Don't get too excited and lose interest. The gift competition that's starting now is basically just an appetizer. The truly interesting gift competition will only appear during the Fire Dragon birth ceremony." With that, Wu Ming consciously looked at 16 Knights, Fei Yao and Yao. I know. You're acting like an old mother," Jiao Fei Yao said casually. This made Wu Ming smile helplessly and shake his head. "If it weren't for you problematic children, I wouldn't be like this." However, they were problematic children, and Jiao Fei Yao instantly found her target. "Look, Yao, there seems to be a nice gift competition going on over there." Jiao Fei Yao pulled Haruai Hiroyuki's hand and pointed at the gift competition that was being held in a certain direction. "Let's go and see." Haruai Hiroyuki showed a faint smile and nodded. "Letitia, go with Flying Bird and the others." Wu Ming looked at the little maid beside him. After all, there was no guarantee that the Pied Piper would not attack Zhou Yuanfei again. Hence, it was safer to have Letitia, a 4-digit expert, follow Zhou Yuanfei. Other than that, there was one more thing, and that was to keep an eye on these 2 problem children. Although compared to 16 Knights, Jiuyuki and Kasuga Yuta were weaker, their ability to cause trouble wasn't bad at all. In order to prevent the evening event from being ruined by a problematic child, Wu Ming felt that he had an obligation to help. Then Wu Ming put his hand on Letitia's head and touched it. "But don't just focus on them. You should enjoy yourself too. It's been hard on you to be a maid all this time." Letitia blushed and looked warm. "Yes, master, I understand." After that, Letitia nodded with a smile and followed behind Kubo Asaka and Haruai Biyao. "Then I'll go shopping too. See you guys later." 16 Knights, who had already walked a few meters away, waved his hand. "Mr. 16 Knights? Wait for me." Black Rabbit angrily chased after 16 Knights in the reverse direction. She didn't dare to let 16 Knights go shopping alone. If that happened, the probability of something happening would be 100%. I'll follow them and take a look." Rin was worried as he laughed awkwardly. Then he followed the direction of 16 Knights. As for Lily, sorry, she wasn't like the others. As the leader of the logistics team, she had a lot of important things to do, so she didn't come. So only Wu Ming was left. However, Wu Ming didn't want to go shopping. That was why he asked Letitia to follow Jiuyuki and the others and not himself. Because Wu Ming was going to visit Mandela and Salamandra tonight. Of course, it was a secret visit. With that in mind, Wu Ming looked in the direction of Salamandra's base. Salamandra's base, Mandela's office. Mandela was dealing with documents. Coincidentally, Shadora was also dealing with documents in her own office. Because of Shadora's immaturity, there were some documents that Shadora couldn't solve, or some documents that needed to infringe on the interests of the community. Mandela took them and dealt with them personally. Or rather, he acted as the bad guy. But after all, there were only a few such documents, so Mandela only needed to deal with them for a short while before he finished them. Closing the last document, Mandela put it aside. Sigh. Mandela lowered his head and sighed. He put his hands on the table and held his forehead. It could only be said that this scene was rare because Mandela had always been full of dignity in front of outsiders and Shadora. We have to get Shadora involved, Mandela said with a frown. If anyone were to see Mandela's frown now, they would probably be shocked. Wu Ming was one of the people who was surprised. I think your plan has a higher chance of failure. Who is it? The sudden voice made Mandela instantly pull out the sword that never left his side even when he was sleeping and looked around vigilantly. Don't be nervous, it's me. The sudden voice came from behind Mandela. Mandela quickly and cautiously turned his head and saw a young man with black hair and red eyes. Though, sir, why are you visiting so late at night? Although he saw that it was an acquaintance, Mandela was even more uneasy. Because the person in front of him most likely knew about his plan, and he was someone he couldn't afford to offend, whether in terms of strength or influence. He had experienced the other party's strength, and the relationship between the other party and White Yaksha didn't seem like ordinary friends, which made him feel inferior. Don't be so nervous, Mandela. I'm not here to trouble you. Wu Ming put away an epic-level aura concealment item in Yggdrasil, went around Mandela's office and sat on the chair in front of the desk. Mandela didn't say anything, but he put away his sword. Because he knew that it made no difference to the other party whether he held the sword or not. Then Mandela sat down in his chair, facing Wu Ming. Seeing that Mandela sat down but didn't speak, Wu Ming began to tease him. But I didn't expect you to be so considerate of Shadora. I thought you just wanted to cultivate a puppet leader. I never thought that way. Shadora, who has the perfect bloodline, is the rightful heir of Salamandra. Mandela slammed the table and stood up as if he was insulted. Wu Ming didn't care about Mandela's anger at all, and waved his hand casually. Whatever you say, I don't care at all. I only care about one thing, and that is our no name. Wu Ming's words calmed Mandela down. He knew very well that Wu Ming was here to negotiate with him. And the bargaining chip was that Wu Ming didn't expose him during the day. Then Wu Ming went straight to the point. I won't bully you. We, no name, will take most of the credit for dealing with the Demon King. Chapter 649. Then Mandela's face instantly darkened. Impossible. Mandela's face darkened as he tried to control his irritable heart. He felt like he was being bullied. Let me put it this way. Even if you don't have this opportunity with me around, no name will definitely not lack any opportunities. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes and looked at Mandela rather arrogantly. When Wu Ming said this, Mandela knew that his plan was almost completely exposed in Wu Ming's eyes. So all Mandela could do now was accept it passively. Mandela had to admit that Wu Ming's words were indeed true. Even though no name seemed to be in a worse state than Salamandra, that was not the case at all. Although no name was at the bottom of the 7-digit hierarchy, Mandela thought that Wu Ming was probably at the 3-digit hierarchy, and this was a conservative estimate. In short, he would not be weaker than White Yaksha. With such an existence, why would no name be worried about not being able to rise? It's an opportunity that we don't need, but it's the most important opportunity for you. I guarantee that Shadora will be able to achieve what you imagine without any risk in this fire dragon's birth ceremony. In return, no name will have to take most of the credit. It's a very reasonable deal, isn't it? Although this opportunity was dispensable to no name, since there was a ready-made opportunity, why wouldn't Wu Ming seize it? All in all, Wu Ming would definitely take all the credit this time. Of course, Wu Ming would not go too far. He also gave Mandela a benefit that satisfied him, or rather, it was just right. What Mandela needed was for Shadora to live up to her name as the ruler of the Northern District, so he attracted the Demon King. Wu Ming's bargaining chip was precisely this point, and it was a risk-free bargaining chip. This undoubtedly tempted Mandela. Then Wu Ming continued. How can I believe you? Mandela asked. To put it nicely, do you still have a choice? Wu Ming smiled. Then Wu Ming continued. Mandela really did not have a choice. Either Wu Ming would expose this matter to White Yaksha and Salamandra's plan would be ruined, or he would listen to Wu Ming. In any case, he might be able to achieve his goal. If it was the former, then the plan was doomed. If it was the latter, then there was still a chance. Seeing Mandela nodding thoughtfully, Wu Ming sneered. Let me say something unpleasant, Lord Mandela. Wu Ming emphasized the word, Lord. Then Wu Ming waved his hand, and 4 translucent grids surrounded Mandela. Immediately afterward, countless powerful weapons filled with ancient auras appeared in the square, each of them aimed at Mandela. I don't want you to be unable to see tomorrow's sun. The Manchala square formation appeared. Looking at these weapons aimed at him, Mandela's eyes widened, and he said in disbelief, These are all Godhood weapons? Wu Ming sat comfortably in his seat, looked at Mandela who stood up and was speechless and said slowly, You're quite knowledgeable. Yes, these are all Godhood weapons. Wu Ming said as he reached out and touched a sword floating beside him. Although these Godhood weapons are not the main body, their power is no different from the main body, and they can be used alone. However, Wu Ming didn't want to prove this for Mandela, and Mandela, who had a little bit of strength, didn't need Wu Ming to prove it for him. He clearly recognized that these weapons were indeed Godhood weapons, which was the so-called Godhood weapons. Mandela took a deep breath, then exhaled. So, you mean if I don't agree you will kill me? If you want. Wu Ming looked at Mandela with a smile. Wu Ming was not a pushover. He could even take on the Supreme of Nazalic without hesitation. Killing a 5-figure community's second in command, Wu Ming didn't have the slightest psychological burden. Just like that, Wu Ming and Mandela didn't speak anymore. After a while, Mandela sighed. I hope you can keep your word. Mandela looked deeply at Wu Ming and he chose to compromise. At least I won't unilaterally abandon my allies. Wu Ming responded sarcastically. Wu Ming said as he put away Manchala square formation. In the entire Salamandra, only Shadora doesn't know about this, so, based on Mandela's words, it seemed that not only the higher-ups of Salamandra knew about this, but even the lower-level members seemed to know about it. Of course I know. With Shadora's personality, how could she agree to your approach? Wu Ming looked at Mandela with an unpleasant expression. However, even so, he couldn't deny that his behavior this time was playing with fire, and it was the kind that burned everyone together. If it weren't for Shadora, Salamandra would no longer exist. There was no need to doubt that Wu Ming had such strength. Then Wu Ming gave Mandela a cold look, then turned around and went to the window. You don't need to do anything, just wait quietly. Wu Ming finished speaking, and his figure instantly disappeared from the window. Looking at the swinging window, Mandela sat down and closed his eyes. Sigh. On the street, Wu Ming, who had blended into the crowd at some point, followed the flow of people and admired the surrounding scenery, but his thoughts were elsewhere. To be honest, after Wu Ming knew the truth, he had the urge to kill Salamandra. Salamandra collectively held the Fire Dragon birth ceremony under the premise that the Demon King would attack the Fire Dragon birth ceremony. As for the invitation no name, it was only after White Yaksha asked Salamandra, and received a definite answer that he was invited. This meant that no name, and the community of 54,545 Outer Sanctum had been placed in the position of Salamandra, as a bargaining chip in the wager. There were only 2 kinds of people who could do this. One was that they would definitely win, and Salamandra obviously didn't have this kind of mentality. The second was that Salamandra didn't care about the safety of the bargaining chips they used as gambling chips. After all, if they lost, Salamandra would also be confiscated by the Demon King along with the bargaining chips. However, this was not an excuse for the other party to use no name as a chess piece. Imagine if the community that came was not no name, but another community, then what would the result be if White Yaksha was defeated or trapped by the other party using a special method? They would all be wiped out. However, there were no ifs. This time, no name came. Wu Ming admired Mandela's courage, daring to use him and his community as chess pieces. Salamandra. However, in Wu Ming's opinion, Mandela was just tired of living. However, seeing that Wu Ming had a good impression of Salamandra, and that she didn't know about it, Wu Ming still let Salamandra go. However, the price was that the big credit this time was basically all taken into no-name assist. Well, it can be considered as spending money to avoid disaster. Wu Ming stopped thinking about this matter. At this time a voice sounded. Ah, isn't this Villo? What a coincidence. Chapter 650. Wu Ming looked towards the source of the voice and saw a red dress. Flying bird. Wu Ming was slightly surprised. That's right, it was Zhu Yufei. How did you get here? However, Zhu Yufei frowned in dissatisfaction at Wu Ming's nonsensical words. What do you mean how did I get here? Didn't you send us here using the teleportation gate? Are you having a fever? Jiao Yufei said as she reached out her hand towards Wu Ming's forehead. The naturally smooth and tender hand touched Wu Ming's forehead. Because of the temperature in the North District, this tender hand gave Wu Ming a cold feeling. It's not hot? Jiao Yufei said with a serious expression. Wu Ming waved his hand and slapped Jiao Yuasuka's hand away from his forehead. Please, how could I have a fever? Wu Ming smiled helplessly. The reason why Wu Ming was surprised when he saw Jiao Yufei was because he was interrupted while he was deep in thought, and realized that it was someone he knew. It was like a person who was in a light sleep suddenly being woken up by someone. Even if it was someone he knew, he would still be shocked. As for his spirit, Wu Ming would not release it if it was not necessary. Firstly, it would be tiring, and secondly, it would cause trouble. Furthermore, Wu Ming was deep in thought, so Jiao Yufei did not approach him. That's true. How could a spirit have a fever? Jiao Yufei nodded in realization. He did not expect Jiao Yufei to be so natural. He shook his head and stopped thinking about it. Speaking of which, aren't Letitia and the others with you? Why can't I see them? Wu Ming could sense Letitia's location, but it was not here. Although Letitia wasn't far from here, with Silent Land's instructions, Letitia shouldn't have left Jiao Yuanfei's side since she was taken care of by Silent Land. When Wu Ming asked this question, Jiao Yuan Flying Bird's body suddenly froze. After all, Letitia is also a girl. The festival is so interesting that it's inevitable that she would overlook it. Jiao Fei Niao put her hands together and smiled at Wu Ming. However, from Wu Ming's point of view, Kiyoshi and Haruhibu Yaichi must have caused Letitia to be careless for a short period of time, which led to Letitia letting Kiyoshi escape. From Wu Ming's point of view, the reason why he didn't see Haruhi Hataki was either because he was covering for Koyo Asuka, or because he had separated from Koyo Asuka when the latter was escaping. You guys sure are brave. Aren't you afraid of meeting the Pied Piper and those rats again? Wu Ming sighed. As expected, problem children were still problem children. After that, Wu Ming used his dependency authority to tell Letitia that Jiao Yuan Flying Bird was on his side. However, Wu Ming felt that Letitia's position was quickly moving towards his side. In other words, she was moving towards Jiao Yuan Flying Bird. I'm not afraid of that rat manipulator. If it wasn't for the fact that I couldn't use my powerful grace in the exhibition hall, I wouldn't have been in such a sorry state. Jiao Yuan Flying Bird was like a proud red fox as she raised her neck. However, Wu Ming didn't continue to talk to Jiao Yuan Flying Bird. Instead, he smiled at her. This made Jiao Yuan Flying Bird feel that something was wrong. Bird. So, sister. A childish yet irritable voice suddenly came from behind Jiao Yuan Flying Bird. Jiao Yuan Flying Bird let out a cute squeal and immediately hid behind Wu Ming. The newcomer was naturally Letitia. Letitia, who had recovered 4 digits, was naturally not slow. In just a few seconds while Wu Ming and Jiao Yuan Flying Bird were talking, she arrived behind Jiao Yuan Flying Bird. Letitia, how are you? Jiao Yuan Flying Bird smiled awkwardly as she greeted her. I'm not good. Letitia opened her black shadow wings and floated in the air at the same level as Wu Ming and Jiao Yuan Flying Bird. She spoke calmly. Although she was a bit irritable after being tricked by a problem child again, when she saw her master, her anger disappeared. I'm the master's perfect maid. With this thought in mind, Letitia was no longer angry. Of course, even if she wasn't angry, she could still be a bit angry with her actions. Letitia moved Haruhi Toshi, who was hanging upside down behind her and tied up by a black shadow rope, to the front of her. At this moment, Miss Toshi's eyes were like mosquito coils. It was obvious that she had fainted. Haruhi Toshi's cat, Sanmao Cat, received the same treatment as Haruhi Toshi. The poor cat's eyes were also like mosquito coils. It looked like it couldn't hold on any longer. Toshi? Why are you Toshi? Jiao Yuan Flying Bird shouted subconsciously. Needless to say, Haruhi Toshi must have been affected by Letitia's high-speed movement while he was hanging upside down. But no matter what, Haruhi Toshi was still much stronger than normal people. So when Jiao Yuan Flying Bird called her name, she woke up a bit. I can still. Don't give up. Flying Bird. Then Haruhi Toshi's body naturally drooped down and fainted again. Toshi? Jiao Yuan Flying Bird was shocked. Wu Ming didn't know what to say. Letitia, on the other hand, looked relieved. That's what you get for messing with me. Needless to say, Letitia must have done something to punish Hiroyuki Haruhi for putting him in such a coma. Damn it. I will inherit Toshi's will. I won't give in. Jiao Yuan Flying Bird was filled with righteous indignation. But, slap. It was the sound of a palm hitting a body. Yadash. It was followed by Miss Jiao Yuan Flying Bird's scream. Looking at Jiyuan Flying Bird, who was blushing and holding her, but while glaring at him, Wuming narrowed his eyes. If you don't want to walk around, we can go back now. Jiyuan Flying Bird admitted defeat. But, today's humiliation, you better remember it and return it 100 times? Jiyuan Flying Bird said viciously. Wuming used his spiritual energy to look at the crowd around him and shook his head helplessly. Yes, yes, Mississippi. Let's go. Just like that, Wuming brought Letitia, Jiyuan Flying Bird, and Haruai Toshi, who had woken up and was fine to walk around the night ritual. At the appointed time, the members of No Name gathered at the appointed place and returned to No Name together. Whether it was Jiyuan Flying Bird or Haruai Toshi, the two problem children were tired from playing. They took a bath with Black Rabbit and the other girls and prepared to sleep. Wuming and the other men weren't that tired. After saying goodbye, they went to the library to read. This caused Wuming and 16 Knights to be alone. The Fire Dragon birth ritual is about to attack. Do you have any plans? 16 Knights suddenly asked. Chapter 651. Standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window of the No Name meeting room, 16 Knights looked at the night scenery and said to Wuming without turning his head, I do have a plan. I've already talked to Mandela about it. Wuming used the tea set to make tea for himself while replying to 16 Knights without turning his head. He's in the limelight again. I really want to teach that guy a lesson. 16 Knights laughed arrogantly. 16 Knights wasn't stupid. Compared to the other No Name members, he could be considered extremely smart. Going back in time, 16 Knights easily guessed why Wuming suggested going to the night ritual tonight. To be honest, even the night sacrifice on the eve of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony wasn't that interesting. Otherwise, the three problem children wouldn't have agreed to come back. It was impossible for Wuming not to know this. So why did he suggest going to the night sacrifice? Naturally, it was to give orders to Mandela. Of course, in the entire No Name, only Wuming, who had the strength to crush them, could be called an order. If anyone else went, even 16 Knights, it could only be called a negotiation. It was very simple. It was because they didn't have the strength to completely crush Mandela. Although he was a little unwilling, 16 Knights understood that it was best for Wuming to go, so he didn't say or complain. Although Mandela is quite ruthless to others, he really cares about Shadora and Salamandra. Wuming poured the brewed tea into 2 cups and put down the teapot. What a coincidence. I'm also that kind of person. 16 Knights laughed. His smile was quite scary. Not only was Wuming protective, but 16 Knights was also protective. 16 Knights, who had already been recognized as a partner and community, had become the other party's chess piece. Naturally, 16 Knights was furious. Of course, this anger wouldn't be shown to 16 Knights. To put it simply, if something happened to the people in No Name this time, 16 Knights would destroy Salamandra, and it would be done with a smile on its face. Similarly, Wuming was also such a person, but Wuming was even more ruthless than 16 Knights. If it wasn't for Shadora and White Yaksha, Salamandra would have been destroyed by Wuming. Disregarding the residents of the entire 54545 outer sect, the community, and even the other outer sect members who came to participate in the competition, and placing everyone on the chessboard with the risk of death as a bargaining chip. In Wuming's opinion, such a community was completely unnecessary. Whether it was lowering the number of people in the community or giving up on the title of the Northern District's ruler, there were so many options, but they had to choose a risky one that would either succeed or die trying. Moreover, it was a method that would drag everyone down with them. This was enough for Wuming to personally deal with them. Wuming wasn't someone who liked to casually slaughter others, but in the face of such a community, Wuming had a clear conscience. However, it was precisely because Wuming wasn't someone who liked to casually slaughter others, and because he saw that Salamandra had a kind and immature leader with great potential, Wuming gave up on this idea. He believed that Shadora, who gradually took over the ownership of Salamandra from Mandela, would be able to manage this community well and wouldn't drag everyone down with her to die trying this time. Mandela has already compromised. What they've done this time has instead made a wedding dress for our No Name. Wuming chuckled softly and took a sip of his tea. Oh, what do you mean? 16 Knights asked. Wuming told 16 Knights about his conversation with Mandela. We took most of the credit? Does that mean that the Demon King also gave us full authority to deal with? 16 Knights' eyes lit up. Something like that. Wuming nodded. Although Salamandra's approach was inhumane, since things had already come to this point they couldn't waste it. Then they would leave it to No Name to accept. Well done, little brother. 16 Knights turned his head and made a great gesture to Wuming. But don't be happy too early. If the other party can't trap White Yiksha and let him make a move, then we won't have a chance. After all, it was already so obvious. If White Yiksha didn't make any preparations, then it would be too embarrassing. Then I'll have to look forward to it. 16 Knights joked, then walked to Wuming's side, picked up the cup of tea that Wuming prepared for him, and drank it in one gulp. The tea is good. Time to sleep. 16 Knights waved his hand and left the conference room. Kacha? The sound of the door closing meant that only Wuming was left. Slowly sipping his tea, Wuming looked out the window, admiring the night view. I wonder if those people will come to join in the fun. As for Pest's claim that no one told her about Wuming, but she wanted to see Wuming herself, Wuming was skeptical. Wuming felt that there must be a mysterious group of people behind this. The ceremony this time might not be as simple as I thought it would be. The night passed quietly. Time flew by quickly. 2 to 3 days later, the opening ceremony of the Fire Dragon Birth Festival was successfully held. Although it was an opening ceremony, as the host, Shadora, only announced the start of the Fire Dragon Birth Festival. Due to the large number of people, Shadora merely spat out flaming words in the sky and used a special blessing to spread her words. She didn't summon anyone to explain it. The opening ceremony was peaceful, which made White Yiksha feel relieved. Usually there were only 3 important parts in a festival: the opening ceremony, the closing ceremony, and the grandest gift competition. Since the opening ceremony was fine, then the other party must be planning to attack during the grandest gift competition or the closing ceremony of the Fire Dragon Birth Festival. However, the other communities didn't know about this, so they were immersed in the joyous and grand festival. Although Salamandra was a little worried, they basically appeared at the various gift competitions as guards. Their serious expressions didn't let others see anything, and they just treated it as professionalism. As for No Name, it could only be said that it and Salamandra were the polar opposite. Because Black Rabbit was going to be the judge and Ren was only participating in some ordinary gift competitions, so the main combat power of No Name was basically the 3 problem children. Because the 3 problem children frequently won with their strength, many people and even many communities remembered that the 3 of them were from the No Name without a name. Wuming, who was idling, sat in the audience seat and looked at Kazuhito Yayoi, who had entered the finals. Chapter 652. Wuming was sitting on a special high platform with ordinary spectator seats on both sides. Wuming was sitting next to Byakuya, and Letitia was standing behind him. Shadora was sitting above the 3 of them, and Mandela was standing next to her. There were some lizard or viper guards around the high platform. Looking at the guards and the people sitting here, it was obvious that this was the organizers' viewing platform. Why was Wuming here? Whether it was as a member of No Name, who had joined forces with Salamandra, or based on his own strength, Wuming was qualified to sit here. The reason why only Byakuya and Letitia were next to Wuming was because the others were helping other people. Black Rabbit was refereeing and commentating at the gift competition in front of them. Ren also participated in some not-so-strong gift competitions. Lily, who came along, went to support Ren. Reverse 16 Knights and Jiuyuan Feiniao were also participating in other gift competitions. Don't doubt, the gift competition at the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony was beyond everyone's imagination. The 3 problem children had been participating in the gift competition for the past 2 days. Although the powerful, slacking, Wuming wasn't going to participate in the gift competition, it didn't mean that he didn't pay attention to it. Regarding the 3 problem children participating in the gift competition, Wuming could be said to have watched almost every match. Of course, that was under the condition that there was no conflict. Then why did Wuming come to watch Haruai Hibiya's competition? It was because this was a special gift competition. This gift competition was the biggest type of gift competition at the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, so Shadora would be there. This was also the reason why Black Rabbit would host this gift competition. The Demon King was likely to or would definitely attack when Shadora was present, so Wuming and Byakuya both appeared here. And Haruai Hibiya came to participate because Byakuya got rid of him. This gift competition was called the Showdown of the Creator. Only those who possessed a creation-type gift that could be used permanently could participate. And Haruai Hiroyuki happened to possess a creation-type gift that could be used permanently, the Catalog of Life. Therefore, White Yaksha invited Haruai Hiroyuki to participate in this gift competition. Due to his interest and the fact that White Yaksha had gotten rid of him, Kasuga Biao participated in the gift competition. He cleared all the obstacles and reached the semi-finals. Haruai Biao's opponent was a huge stone man. Silent did not understand the rules of this gift competition, or rather he did not want to understand. He knew that as long as he defeated his opponent, it would be fine. However, it was not difficult for Haruai Hiroyuki, whose enemy was the stone giant. The stone giant in front of Haruai Abe waved its huge arm and punched Haruai Abe. Then with a light jump, Haruai Hiroyuki flew into the air, or rather stood in the air. After participating in White Yaksha's gift tournament, Haruai Hybe gained the friendship of a griffin and obtained the griffin's power. Thus Haruai Hybe could walk on air. Boom! The stone giant's arm slammed into the ground, causing the ground to shake. However, there was no damage to the specially reinforced ground. Because of inertia, the stone giant couldn't quickly retract its fist from the ground. At this moment, the stone giant's body was slanted. However, Haruai Hiroyuki wouldn't let go of this opportunity. Or rather, he was waiting for this opportunity. Haruai Hiroyuki jumped lightly and instantly appeared behind the stone giant. Then he gathered the power he obtained from the elephant into his feet and kicked the stone giant's back. Boom! Haruai Hiroyuki's boots made contact with the stone giant's back, creating a loud boom. Then the stone giant fell forward and fell to the ground, unable to get up again. Then Black Rabbit, who had been waiting for a long time, announced excitedly. The winner is no name, Haruai Hiroyuki. Oh! The whole audience screamed. The audience didn't care about the origin of the winner. They just wanted to see a good match. Haruai Hiroyuki, who defeated his opponent, won the audience's approval. Thus they cheered for the winner, Haruai Hiroyuki. Wuming didn't have any doubts about Haruai Hiroyuki's victory. Although Haruai Hiroyuki wasn't as strong as Wuming and 16 Knights, it didn't mean that he was weak. Before coming to Hakata, Haruai Hiroyuki had a large number of animal abilities. After coming to Hakata, Haruai Hiroyuki also obtained the ability of Phantom Beasts. Haruai Hiroyuki's ability to fly was the most obvious example. Haruai Hiroyuki's effortless victory was already proof of his strength. What a beautiful attack! Byakuya, who was beside Wuming, praised. Miss Haruai Hiroyuki is indeed very strong. Shadora also agreed with Byakuya. Her tone wasn't flattery, but admiration from the bottom of her heart. Although Haruai Hiroyuki had a rather advanced gift, the Vital Catalog, Haruai Hiroyuki was an ordinary person. He was even a sick person who couldn't get out of bed before receiving the Vital Catalog. It wasn't that Haruai Hiroyuki relied on the Vital Catalog to become strong, but Haruai Hiroyuki used the Vital Catalog's ability. The Ancient Flying Bird's gift was also quite powerful, but due to lack of training, the Ancient Flying Bird's ability wasn't that strong. Even other people, or even other races stronger than humans, wouldn't be able to reach Haruai Hiroyuki's level if they didn't work hard with the Vital Catalog. That was why Shadora praised Haruai Hiroyuki. Wuming was quite pleased with Shadora's praise. After all, Haruai Hiroyuki was a member of No Name. However, he couldn't delay the important matters. Alright, Your Highness Shadora, this is the end of the semi-finals. It's your turn to speak. Wuming said to Shadora. Wuming was right. This gift competition called Showdown of the Creator was the grandest gift competition in the Fire Dragon's Birth Festival. Shadora needed to speak for the semi-finals. Shadora nodded nervously, then took a deep breath and walked to the front of the stands. I'll take my leave first. Wuming stood up when Shadora walked to the front and walked to the exit with Letitia. Although it wasn't in line with etiquette, for some reason he didn't dare and couldn't refute Wuming. However, even if he didn't speak, someone else spoke. That's a bit too much, kid. White Yaksha looked at Wuming. No matter what, you're still a person of status. Can't you sit down and wait for her to finish? However, White Yaksha was just putting on an act. She didn't think that Wuming, who was half a problem child, would listen. However, Wuming was seriously thinking. That's true. Wuming nodded. Then Wuming looked at Letitia. Letitia, you sit down in my place. Huh? Chapter 653. Hearing Wuming's nonsensical words, Shadora, who stood at the front, almost knelt down in front of Wuming. But she was still the leader of the northern district, so Shadora still steadied herself and walked to the front. Then, under Byakuya's dumbfounded state, Wuming left Letitia behind and slipped away. Letitia guessed her master's thoughts, sighed and helplessly sat in Wuming's seat. Mandela closed his eyes and did not speak. Letitia was a 4-digit figure after all, so it was not impossible for her to replace Wuming. Anyway, even if she said no, no one would listen. Fortunately, Byakuya and the others sat slightly behind, so no one saw the scene just now. Then Shadora began to speak about the showdown of the Creator Finals. Wuming naturally wouldn't listen. He could only say that Shadora was now a qualified leader. Although she couldn't speak as long as the principal, she could speak a little bit. Wuming had a deep understanding of this during the opening ceremony of the Fire Dragon's birth. Therefore, Wuming left in advance. Wuming came to the exit of the contestants. Although there were guards from Salamandra, because they knew Wuming, they didn't stop Wuming. Just like that, Wuming waited for Haruai Hibuya here. Because Shadora's speech was at the end of the semi-finals, she didn't say much and the speech ended quickly. Haruai Hibuya walked out of the intersection with Sanmao in his arms. Wuming had been waiting for a long time. Villo? Haruai Hibuya was a little surprised when he saw Wuming. What, you didn't expect me to come? Wuming asked with a chuckle. A little. After all, our relationship isn't good enough for you to pick me up alone, right? Haruai Hibe tilted his head and looked at Wuming. In the relationship between the 3 problem children and Wuming, the first thing to talk about was Wuming and 16 Knights. Because of the Pact of Brawl, and the fact that both of them were wise men, the relationship between the two of them was quite good. Although it was not to the extent of being sworn brothers, it was much better than ordinary friends. And because Wuming had indirectly solved the problem of Distant Flying Bird's blessing, the relationship between Distant Flying Bird and Wuming was quite good. Only Haruhi Masaraki and Wuming were not as close to each other as Reverse 16 Knights and Jiofei Niao. The two of them were just partners in the same community. Besides, shouldn't Wuming be with White Yaksha and Shadora? Also, where did Letitia go? Several doubts filled Haruhi Masaraki's mind. Isn't it because the relationship isn't that good that you need to improve your relationship? Wuming joked on a whim. However, Wuming just didn't want to listen to a long story, so he slipped out in advance. However, Wuming's words made Haruhi Masaraki's face turn slightly red. His words had some lethality to Haruhi Masaraki, who had never been in a relationship before. However, seeing his young mistress being teased, the 3-furred cat in Haruhi Masaraki's arms began to bare its fangs and brandish its claws at Wuming. Meow 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 meow, how dare you tease my young mistress, this old servant wants to duel with you. Although the 3-furred cat had seen Wuming's pressure, it was about his young mistress, so this old servant spoke without hesitation. Hey old man, your arms and legs are old. You should retire peacefully, Wuming joked to the 3-furred cat. Although Wuming wasn't a cat and didn't know cat or animal language, strictly speaking, Wuming wasn't human. Even if he didn't understand the meaning of the 3-furred cat's words, Wuming still guessed what the 3-furred cat was saying based on its behavior and the fact that they were both non-human species. 3-furred cat, don't mess around. Haruhi Masaraki's expression returned to normal as he comforted the cat in his arms. She naturally knew that Wuming was joking, but because everyone was busy, she was already very happy to have a partner pick her up after her competition. No Name had a high status in Haruhi Masaraki's heart. Even if he didn't have much interaction with his partners, Haruhi Masaraki would still have a good attitude. Do you want to go together? Haruhi Masaraki looked at Wuming. Of course. Wuming shrugged. Otherwise, why would Wuming wait for Haruhi Masaraki? Wuming Masaraki and Haruhi Masaraki walked side by side on the road to Salamandra. Although they could use Wuming's portal to return to No Name at night, it was still somewhat inconvenient. Therefore, when the fire dragon was born, Shadora prepared a room for No Name and the others in Salamandra. As for Lily, although she said that she still had work to do, this was a rare event. She wasn't invited by Wuming Masaraki and the others. Instead, she was rejected by the other children in the logistics department. Leave it to us. This was the children's promise to Lily, which almost made her cry. In order not to disappoint her companions, Lily followed. However, Wuming Masaraki would still return to No Name every night to check. After all, No Name only had the magic puppets that didn't have life and consciousness. It was inevitable that he would feel uneasy. However, every time Wuming Masaraki returned to No Name to check, No Name was well managed by the children. Thinking of this, Wuming Masaraki couldn't help but smile. Can I ask you a question? Seeing Wuming Masaaki smile, Masaaki suddenly asked. Of course, but as a price, I also want to ask you a question later. Wuming Masaaki paused for a moment, then proposed an exchange. Sure. Haruhi Hibu nodded, then asked her question. Villo, aren't you afraid of the Demon King? Masaaki asked calmly. Through past conversations, Masaaki knew that Wuming Masaaki had never seen or met a Demon King in this world. Therefore, it seemed reasonable for her to ask such a question. However, in Wuming Masaaki's eyes, this was just Masaaki's worry. That's right, worry. Although Masaaki was also interested in the Demon King, it would be a lie to say that she wasn't worried. Whether it was Masaaki or Jiyoyuki Masaaki, these two problem children's problem level was much weaker than 16 Knights Reverse. For example, although Jiyoyuki Masaaki and Masaaki seemed to be interested in the Demon King's attack, they weren't as excited and expectant as 16 Knights Reverse. They were slightly worried. After all, I've encountered many powerful enemies who weren't weaker than me, so I'm not afraid. Wuming Masaaki replied. However, I still have the power to protect my companions. Wuming Masaaki looked confidently at Masaaki. Seeing Wuming Masaaki's confident smile, she who had experienced Wuming's power, couldn't help but feel relieved. However, the bitterness in her eyes didn't escape Wuming Masaaki's eyes. What about you, Yao? Do you have something on your mind? Wuming could tell that Yao had something on his mind. Facing Wuming's question, Haruhi Kiba pondered for a moment before answering. Am I too weak? Chapter 654. Too weak. Wuming repeated Haruhibu Yachi's words. I'm wondering if I'm too weak. Haruhibu Yachi nodded, indicating that Wuming did not mishear. Why do you think so? Wuming did not stop because of Haruhibu Yachi's words as he asked while walking. The four of us came to this world together. Let's not talk about you for now. 16th Knights has the power to fight against you, and Flying Bird has also found her own path with your help. Becoming stronger is only a matter of time. It seems that I will soon become the weakest person here. That's only about, right? Wuming asked. Let's not talk about 16 Knights. Fei Niao hasn't found a suitable gift for her ability development. It's not good to define it so early. Then Wuming reached out his hand and hit Haruhibu Yachi's little head. It hurts. Haruhibu Yachi held the three-furred cat with one hand and used the other hand to cover the place where Wuming hit her head. You haven't been completely surpassed. You just have some momentum. Why are you so unconfident, little girl? Wuming said in a grandfatherly tone. Since there's momentum, then I'm destined to be the weakest. Haruhibu Yachi pouted unhappily. In my era, everyone was constantly chasing after others. No one would relax after surpassing others. Instead, they would work harder after surpassing others. This was the so-called one step ahead. However, Wuming did not agree with this. Then let me ask you, Yachi, will you always be ahead of others if you're ahead of others? No, Haruhibu Yachi answered. However, he was right. There was nothing absolute in the world. But it's difficult to surpass others. This was the realization of the future Haruhibu Yachi. That may be the case in your era, but don't forget this is the box court. Wuming's words made Haruhibu Yachi stop in his tracks. What kind of existence was the box court? There were gods, demons, illusory beasts and everything else. It was a place where all miracles existed. If you don't have the confidence to overtake them in a place like this, then I believe your father won't be able to take it either. Wuming also stopped and looked at Haruhi Yachi. Haruhi Yachi was stunned. She was bound by the ideas of her era, which were old ideas to Hakata. Now she was breaking free. Looking at the stunned Haruhi Hiroyuki, Wuming decided to work harder. Well then Yao, let's talk about another problem. ? Haruhi Hibu finally reacted and looked at Wuming in confusion. I heard from Black Rabbit and the others that you came from a future more advanced than 16 Knights era, right? Haruhi Hiroyuki nodded. This was not a secret. Because it had been a long time since a girl of the same age as Black Bunny appeared in the community, as if they had found something in common, Black Bunny would drag Haruhi Hiroyuki and Gio Asuka together to have a tea party when she was free to deepen the girls' relationship. Of course, sometimes Letitia would be dragged in as well. The news that Haruhi Hiroyuki came from the future was accidentally revealed by Black Rabbit when they were in the community. Geo Asuka came from the era just after World War II, and 16 Knights is from the 21st century. As for you, you come from a future more advanced than 16 Knights era. This was the news that Wuming had accidentally heard. This explained why Geo Asuka was so conservative. They are both chosen children of their respective eras, Haruai Hiroyuki said with relief. Indeed, whether it was Geo Asuka from the era just after World War II or 16 Knights from the 21st century, their respective abilities were especially advantageous for their eras. However, in Haruai Hiroyuki's future, Haruai Hiroyuki's abilities were not so magical. Flying in the sky was possible with the support of technology. Great strength was possible with the support of technology. Superhuman speed was possible with the support of technology. Even lifespan was possible with the support of technology. Therefore, Haruai Hiroyuki, who could obtain the abilities of animals, was not like a chosen child in her own era. In my era, I was just an ordinary person who endured the torment of illness. If it wasn't for the gift that my father gave me, I'm afraid I would still be lying in bed. Haruai Hiroyuki said softly as he picked up the wooden carving on his neck. Hiroyuki, don't underestimate the gift that your father gave you. Wuming shook his head. You should know that this thing can turn into a crazy chimera if it's not used properly. Although Wuming didn't know about the genome tree, White Yaksha did. White Yaksha said that people who once had part of the genome tree all became chimeras in the end. Haruai Hiroyuki's gift was the complete version of the genome tree, but Haruai Hiroyuki didn't show any signs of becoming a chimera. You, who can freely use this power without suffering any backlash, are not much worse than 16 Knights and Flying Bird, the two chosen children in your eyes. Perhaps the reason why Haruai Hiroyuki didn't suffer any backlash was because he only obtained the abilities of ordinary animals, but who knew if Haruai Hiroyuki was a talent that was buried in her era. And Wuming felt that the person who gave Haruai Hiroyuki this gift, Haruai Hiroyuki's father, would never harm his daughter, Haruai Hiroyuki. Perhaps it was because Haruai Hiroyuki's father thought that his daughter could control and master this power, so he gave this powerful and secret power to Haruai Hiroyuki. This gift is the highest level of human gift. How can it only have the effect of receiving the abilities of animals, mythical beasts, and phantasmal beasts? Wuming smiled. You're saying that the wooden carving that my father gave me has other abilities? Haruai Hiroyuki blinked and looked at the wooden carving in his hand. I only know that this wooden carving isn't simple. You'll have to explore the rest yourself. Wuming smiled and shrugged. The reason why 16 Knights is strong is because he doesn't have much room to grow. At least compared to you, he doesn't have much left. Wuming joked. And Jiuyuki hasn't surpassed you yet. Before she does, why don't you surpass her first? Even so, let's not talk about the abilities that I haven't discovered yet. Currently, I can only obtain their abilities by making friends. Haruai Hiroyuki had made friends with almost all the ordinary animals, so their abilities were naturally obtained by him. Then the only targets left were phantasmal beasts, mythical beasts, and the like. But even in Hakata, how could it be so easy to meet phantasmal beasts and mythical beasts? It was thanks to Byakuya that he was able to make friends with Griffin. Wuming smiled at Haruai Hiroyuki's question and then said, let me ask you. Then let me ask you, Yao. After this heart-to-heart talk, are we friends? Haruai Hiroyuki nodded subconsciously, but she suddenly froze. Seeing the stunned Haruai Hiroyuki, Wuming smiled. I'll help you collect information about your opponent. Wuming waved his hand and disappeared from Haruai Hiroyuki's sight. Haruai Hiroyuki, who was left holding the three-furred cat, stood on the street and looked at his hands. Friend? Chapter 655. The finals of the Showdown of the Creator was not held immediately the next day. It was set to be held 5 days later. After all, it was the grandest and most lively gift competition of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. How could it end in a hurry? It naturally had to be delayed for a few days. In the next few days, because Shadora had to attend some gift competitions, Wuming and White Yaksha had been accompanying her. Renhe Lily also participated in a few gift competitions. After receiving a lot of rewards, she stopped participating in the gift competitions and accompanied Shadora to attend the gift competitions like Wuming. Although it was said that Renhe Lily participated in the gift competitions, it was basically Ren who won all of them by himself. Ren was indeed very weak, but that was in the past. Ren was now very strong. Ren had a special gift called Elf Servant. Its function was to summon spirit races that had formed a subordinate relationship with him, including star spirits, elves and demons, and order them around. This gift didn't seem to be anything special because even without this gift, one could still sign a contract with others and become a contractor and a contractor. However, this gift wasn't as simple as it seemed. It was rather special. Under normal circumstances, if the controlled person was stronger than the master he contracted, there would be a problem. Either the controlled person would break free from the master's restraints and become a free person, or the controlled person's original strength would be reduced and suppressed. For example, the former leader of Perseus, Luos, who had the demon star spirit Argel. The demon star spirit Argel was a powerful star spirit comparable to White Yeksha. Because of the inheritance of mythological history, he was forced to become a servant of Perseus. However, because Perseus couldn't completely control Argel, he imposed shackles on him and reduced Argel's ability. That was how he was able to control Argel. As a result, Argel lost himself and became a servant that completely served the leader of Perseus. It was even worse in Luo's generation because Luo's strength was inferior to the previous leaders of Perseus. He even reduced the 5-digit number of Perseus to 6 digits because of his lack of progress. The useless Lus could no longer control Argel, so he added a large number of shackles to Argel's body, greatly reducing his abilities. When Wuming took Argel from Luos, he couldn't help but feel sorry for Argel. Due to various shackles, Argel's strength had dropped to the edge of 5 digits, and was now approaching 6 digits. If Argel fought 16 knights in his current state, 16 knights would be able to defeat him in less than 3 moves. This was the tragic end of a slave that was stronger than the slave, especially when the slave was rather vile. Now, it was time to talk about the gift of benevolence, the elven servant. This gift was that no matter how high the master's spiritual lattice was, he could completely dominate the other party. This was a special gift that existed in the bloodline of the Russell family after the Russell family received Solomon's gift. If he handed Argel over to Ren, Ren would be able to completely remove the seal on Argel and allow him to unleash his full potential. He would also be able to suppress Argel and prevent him from betraying him. In fact, that was what Wuming did. The powerful astral spirit, Argel, who could petrify a planet and unleash its full power, had become Ren's slave. At first, Ren was unwilling to accept it no matter what. However, under Wuming's persuasion, Ren still refused to accept it. As a last resort, Wuming set up a gift competition for Ren, which allowed Ren to obtain Argel. Of course, Wuming did not show any mercy to Ren, because mercy was an insult at this time. Therefore, Wuming designed a gift competition that did not exceed Ren's limits based on his strength. Ren also completed Wuming's gift competition with outstanding results. After obtaining Argel, Ren's strength also rose from the bottom of no name to the top of no name. After all, regardless of whether the slave was alive or dead, it was considered a personal gift. Just like Letitia, although she was a 4-digit powerhouse, she was also Wuming's slave. In other words, she was Wuming's personal gift. In short, no name did not waste Perseus at all. If it was useful, it kept it for itself, and if it was useless, it sold it. Perseus could be said to have completely unleashed its final brilliance. As for Luos and the others from Perseus, Wuming was very merciful and did not sell them. Instead, he left them to fend for themselves. After provoking no name, they still wanted to live well? Not selling them was already considered merciful. To be honest, if it was not for Wuming wanting to maintain his amiable image in no name, how could he not remove the root of the problem? However, not being ruthless allowed Wuming's reputation in no name to increase by quite a bit. Wuming's vague position as the leader of no name was the best proof. In name, Ren was the leader, but in some important matters Ren would seek Wuming's opinion. Because 16th Knights was not as strong as Wuming, he often gave the limelight to Wuming. However, Wuming really did not want to be the leader, so Wuming chose to avoid certain matters. Just like when Haruhito Hiroyuki won the Creators Showdown finals, Wuming ran away when Shadora was speaking. Only when Wuming was not there, Ren would truly take on the responsibility of being the leader. After all, with the Devil Star Spirit, Ren was not weaker than anyone in no name. However, because Ren did not use Argel in the eyes of outsiders, he was still the weak Ren. Therefore, Ren chose to participate in some of the less powerful gift competitions. In order to highlight Ren's existence, Wuming did not appear in the VIP seats. However, Wuming was still there. Because if nothing unexpected happened, today would be the day of the demon's attack. As if she had decided to appear at the end, the demon king Pest did not appear. 5 days passed peacefully during the fire dragon's birth ceremony. On this day, the gift competition that Shadora needed to participate in was the Creators Showdown Finals. This was also the last gift competition that Shadora needed to participate in. If Pest did not appear, she would completely miss the opportunity. White Yaksha was very vigilant, and Wuming was also vigilant in the surroundings. Even Reverse 16th Knights and Distant Flying Bird did not participate in other gift competitions on this day. Instead, they chose to sit together with White Yaksha and Wuming in the VIP seats with Shadora. In the contestant passage, Wuming and Haruhito Hiroyuki gave their final instructions. Then Wuming took Sanmao from Hiroyuki's hands. "I've told you all the information about your opponent. Don't disappoint me, Hiroyuki." Hiroyuki nodded with incomparable confidence. "Yes, I will definitely win, my friend." Chapter 656. Wuming watched as Haruai Toshiaki entered the arena alone. The rules of the Showdown of the Creators clearly stated that the participants were allowed to bring one assistant with them. They could only bring one assistant. Of course, it did not state that they had to bring one assistant with them. They could also choose not to. It was quite humane, was it not? Naturally, Haruai Toshiaki would choose the latter. You want to ask why? Naturally, it was because she had obtained the help of her new friend. Moreover, it was not a small help. After Haruai Toshiaki entered the arena, Wuming did not go to the spectator stands or the special seats near White Yaksha to watch the match. That was because Wuming already knew the outcome of the match. After obtaining the help of Wuming, Haruai Toshiaki's chances of winning were at least 80 to 90%, if not 100%. After all, regardless of whether it was Wuming's abilities, they were all very powerful. Hence, Wuming was not worried about Haruai Toshiaki at all. However, Wuming would not stay here and do nothing. Today was the biggest match of the Fire Dragon's Birth Festival, the Showdown of the Creators. During the match, or rather at the end of the match, the invading Devil Lord Pest would definitely come. Hence, Wuming needed to make some preparations. Wuming did not think so. He also did not believe that only Pest's group would come to attack the Fire Dragon's Birth Festival. The group that wanted to buy Letitia would most likely come as well. As for why? One simple word: intuition. Hence, Wuming needed to make some preparations. "Let's walk around for a bit," said Wuming. He placed the three-furred cat on the ground and had it wait obediently. As a cat with high intelligence, the three-furred cat would naturally not run around. The three-furred cat consciously ran to the entrance where Haruai Toshiaki had entered the arena. It watched Haruai Toshiaki's match. This cat. Wuming could not help but laugh as he shook his head. Then Wuming opened a teleportation door and walked in. Of course, Wuming wasn't just strolling around. He was making preparations. Wuming repeatedly went to a few famous scenic spots in the outer gate of 54,545. Wearing the hidden helmet of Hades that he had obtained from Perseus, Wuming opened his mouth and muttered something. Wuming's hands were not idle either. He was making gestures in the air with one hand. Wuming uttered a series of incantations that sounded like the whispers of a demon. Mysterious runes emerged from Wuming's fingers one after another like elves. In just a short while, Wuming had prepared everything he needed to arrange. At this moment, Wuming suddenly felt a gaze. This gaze came from the red boundary wall. Wuming's head instantly turned towards the direction of the peeping gaze. Wuming focused his gaze and saw a petite figure standing at the highest point of the boundary wall. That person was precisely Pest. As expected, it's you, Pest. Wuming's mouth moved. He believed that with Pest's eyesight, she would be able to see and understand Wuming's lips. After Wuming finished speaking, Pest immediately concealed herself. This was the best proof. "Coming," Wuming said calmly. Then a black-purple ripple engulfed Wuming. Then a piece of black parchment floated down. On the other side, in the competition grounds of the Showdown of the Masters of Creation, countless pieces of black parchment fell down from the sky like raindrops. The entire competition grounds were covered in an ominous black color. The people held the pieces of black parchment in their hands. Their eyes were filled with disbelief and their hands were trembling slightly. Then, as if a barrel of gunpowder had been ignited, the entire spectator stands exploded. The spectators began to flee frantically. In the spectator stands of the competition grounds, the spectators who were originally filled with enthusiasm because of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony only had one thought left: flee. They were like ants on a hot pan. Panicked shouts resounded throughout the competition grounds. Although the shouts were chaotic, it wasn't hard to tell what they were shouting. The Demon King had arrived. Almost everyone who was fleeing frantically was shouting this sentence. There were also a few negative sentences like "run," "we're dead meat," and so on. However, there were still people who didn't panic. For example, Salamandra, who already knew that the Demon King would come. "Hurry! Immediately calm the crowd at the exit and calm them down," Mandela sternly commanded the soldiers beside him. They began to carry out emergency rescue, to alleviate the fear brought about by the Demon King. Shadora wasn't idle either. "Everyone, don't panic." Shadora circulated the air in her chest. Her voice was very loud and clear as it traveled into everyone's ears. However, it wasn't that easy to suppress a panicked horse. Although some of the spectators had already begun to calm down, the majority of them were extremely panicked. They didn't listen to Shadora's words at all. Only a more majestic and terrifying voice could make them stop. "All of you stop." Like a dragon's roar, the moment this sentence was spoken, all the panicked and calm people stopped in their tracks. However, each of their bodies involuntarily trembled slightly, indicating that they were forced to stop by the pressure of a higher species. Immediately after, a figure appeared in the sky. Everyone looked at the figure. His golden vertical pupils undoubtedly indicated that this was the owner of the voice that terrified them. He was an existence of a higher level than any of them. This figure was undoubtedly Wuming. Then Wuming nodded to Shadora, who was standing on the high platform. Wuming, who came here through the portal, saw Shadora's predicament, so he helped her. Shadora nodded and smiled gratefully at Wuming, then spoke to the crowd. "Please evacuate in an orderly manner according to Salamandra's arrangements." The spectators who had already calmed down didn't have any intention of resisting. It was always right to follow the officials at this time. Salamandra began to evacuate the spectators. Seeing that it was about time, Wuming retracted his pressure. His golden vertical pupils turned into ruby pupils. Then Wuming flew toward Haruai Hibakushi, who was on the stage. Ignoring the effect of the Demon King's attack, the pale ghost girl next to Haruai Hibakushi looked depressed. The match was over, and it seemed like Haruai Hibakushi had won. After landing beside Haruai Hibakushi, Wuming looked at Haruai Hibakushi and wanted to say something, but something happened on Shadora's side. The high platform where Shadora and the others were on cracked, and a figure suddenly flew out while laughing maniacally. Needless to say, it was reverse 16 Knights. Furthermore, seeing that 16 Knights was flying in the direction of the realm wall, it was likely that he had also found the Demon King's current location. "This kid." Wuming shook his head helplessly. Choosing to ignore him, Wuming looked at Haruai Hibakushi again. "Hibakushi, congratulations on winning this match." Looking at Wuming's gentle smile and listening to Wuming's words of blessing, Haruai Hibakushi smiled slightly and nodded. "Ah, thank you, my friend." However, Haruai Hibakushi's opponent wasn't happy. "I say, what are you two doing? The Demon King is attacking now. How can you all be so calm and greeting?" The pale-faced girl who looked like a ghost shouted helplessly and with slight dissatisfaction. Because the girl had just experienced Wuming's pressure, she was a little scared of Wuming, so she was a little cautious when she spoke, which seemed a little out of place. At this time, a creature with a pumpkin head floating in the air like a ghost holding a lantern next to the girl spoke. "Yahan, being calm in the face of danger is the style of a strong person, Sasha." Chapter 657. Although this big pumpkin was right, the reason why Wuming and Haruai Hibakushi could greet each other so calmly was actually just because the two of them had a problem child attribute. Of course, Wuming certainly couldn't say that, otherwise the pressure he showed just now would be burned away. "I haven't asked, who are you two?" Wuming coughed and changed the topic. "Willow, Sama, I am Aisha Ignatius of Willow's Wisp. This is the gift of our Willow's Wisp masterpiece, Jack with the Lantern." The girl named Aisha politely and respectfully answered Wuming. "It really is Jack the Pumpkin Monster." Wuming couldn't help but look at the big pumpkin twice. If it was seen by Jiyu and Asuka, the pumpkin monster that appeared on Halloween would probably make Miss Jiyu and Asuka very excited. "Yaha, you can call me Jack Villo Sama." The big pumpkin head carrying the lantern laughed with a strange laugh and respectfully greeted Wuming. Then Wuming asked the question that had been bothering him. "Speaking of which, how do you know my name?" Wuming never introduced himself. In the conversation between Wuming and Haruai Hibakushi just now, Haruai Hibakushi also called Wuming friend, and not Wuming. But whether it was Aisha or Jack, they both knew Wuming's name in this world. At this time, Haruai Hibakushi pulled Wuming's sleeve. Villo, you don't know? It's precisely because you announced your name to the public that no name will sit in the seat that only the organizers can sit in as a special guest and not as a community brought by White Yaksha. Although no name was also invited by White Yaksha, the former's identity was much more advantageous than the latter's. White Yaksha was also thinking for no name, so he announced to the public that no name was a community of friends that he invited to help. Although everyone was puzzled as to why the community with a 3-digit number was no name, it wasn't something they could gossip about, so no one said anything. What's more, whether it was the 3 problem children or Ren, the powerful strength that they had shown these days made the people who participated in the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony recognize no name. They recognized that no name didn't rely on a 3-digit number to be invited by White Yaksha. As for the fact that Wuming was completely unaware of this, it was very likely that it had something to do with the fact that Wuming often slipped away. However, it was impossible for White Yaksha to print his appearance and distribute it, right? There shouldn't be any, because Wuming hadn't seen a single photo of Wuming in the past few days. And White Yaksha had no other way to tell 54,545 what Wuming looked like. Even if there were other ways it wouldn't work. Although Wuming didn't often go shopping, Wuming also went out these days to prepare for the Demon King's attack, so Wuming still met many passers-by. If White Yaksha really told everyone what he looked like, then Wuming couldn't have not noticed it. Then Jack explained to Wuming. Yahang, to be able to release such a strong pressure, if it wasn't the Demon King, I'm afraid only Lord Villo, a friend of Lord White Yaksha. Jack, who had been smiling, said. Although he only had one expression, however, Wuming also figured out why he was recognized. Sure enough, strength was the best ID card, and pass. Immediately afterward, Isha looked at Haruai Buyao with some jealousy. I was still thinking about who that powerful flame belonged to. It turns out that the friend who helped you is Lord Villo, humph. I'll remember you, Haruai Buyao. Next time I definitely won't lose. Jack, let's go. Isha said those words to Haruai Buyao, then jumped onto Jack's huge head. It wasn't that Isha wanted to run away. The Demon King's attack wasn't a small matter. Her community, Willow's Wisp, wasn't far from the outer gate of the 54545, but from Isha's point of view, it shouldn't be affected. However, although the Demon King's attack this time wouldn't affect her community's outer gate, she was still worried, so Isha wanted to go back to her community to take a look. And if there was nothing else, maybe she could bring some helpers to deal with the Demon King. Although the Demon King was a fear to most people, Isha wasn't afraid. Yahang, please don't mind Miss Haruai Buyao. This is Isha's unique way of greeting. She recognizes you. Jack still used his unique laughter to reply. Jack, don't talk nonsense. It's time to go. Isha's face turned red in embarrassment, then she raised her hand and patted Jack's big pumpkin head. Yes, please forgive our rudeness. Yaha. Jack said goodbye to Wuming and Haruai Buyao, then flew away. After all, it was a pumpkin monster, so it was normal that it could fly. She's a little tsundere girl. Wuming didn't mind Isha's rudeness, and instead smiled as he watched Isha and Jack leave. Villo likes tsundere girls? Haruai Buyao tilted his head and looked at Wuming. I can't say that I like them. That I'm just saying, don't take a seat with a code name. Wuming sighed, indicating that Haruai Buyao was focusing on the wrong thing. Understood. Haruai Buyao nodded seriously. Speaking of which, I feel like you've understood something strange. Speaking of which, how's my strength? Wuming didn't want to dwell on this topic. Very strong. Haruai Buyao nodded, then reached out with one hand, and a white flame filled with holiness burned in Haruai Buyao's palm. Indeed, that was Wuming's origin fire, so it was needless to say how strong it was. By burning the source of all things to destroy the opponent, this was a powerful weapon. It was worthy of being called the highest grade of human gift, as it could even borrow the origin dragon's flame. Wuming thought about it carefully, and it was normal for Haruai Buyao to obtain the origin fire from him, because Wuming's ability wasn't limited to the origin fire, and only the origin fire was the most basic and strongest ability of the origin dragon. Wuming had always relied on things he learned from other worlds to fight, and if he was just an origin dragon, then the origin fire was indeed the signature ability of the origin dragon race. However, the origin fire wasn't so easy to control, and Haruai Buyao clearly understood this. But this isn't something that I can control now. As soon as Haruai Buyao finished speaking, the origin fire began to expand as if it was no longer under his control. If nothing unexpected happened, it would explode in a few seconds. However, Wuming was here, so there wouldn't be any problems for a long time. Wuming gently pressed on the origin fire, and the flame was absorbed into his body as if it had met the source. Little idiot, remember to throw it out quickly next time. If it explodes in your palm, even if you don't die, you'll lose a layer of skin. Wuming flicked Haruai Buyao's forehead. Don't think that a grenade won't hurt you just because you know how to pull the pin. If you don't fully control this power, you'll hurt yourself if you use it carelessly. I relied on the explosion of this uncontrollable flame to win by surprise, Haruai Hiroyuki said calmly as he covered his forehead where he had been flicked. And I don't think I'll get hurt next to you. After all, the owner of this power was here, so how could he get hurt? I didn't make an agreement with you to protect you from getting hurt. It's better to be careful. However, although Wuming said this, Haruai Buyao, who used Wuming's flame, was also another kind of Wuming's protection for Haruai Buyao. Understood, Haruai Buyao replied. However, the same answer as before gave Wuming a different experience. Then, they were beaten up by Black Rabbit. You two problematic children. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.